It had been 3 months since the last time I saw my son's family. This morning, when I got his call inviting me to dinner, I almost cried with joy. I spent the whole afternoon baking an apple pie and buying my grandson a new toy car. My heart overflowed with happiness as I walked up to the door of the house I had helped them buy. But what greeted me was my daughter-in-law's fake smile and an ice-cold line. "Mom, we've got unexpected guests tonight. There's no room for you." My son stood behind her, head down, saying nothing. From inside, my grandson's voice floated out. "Who's here, Mom?" "It's not important, honey," my daughter-in-law answered flatly. I froze. The rain fell harder by the minute. I was shivering in my soaked clothes while they sat down to a warm dinner inside. I stood there for 3 hours, in the cold wind and humiliation, until the warmth in my chest came from clarity. I stepped back, pulled out my phone, and quietly locked every account they were living off. Soon, she would learn that tonight's rain was only the beginning of the real storm headed her way. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Marjorie Bennett, 70 years old, a widow for almost 8 years. I live alone in a small house in Portland, Oregon, the home my husband Walter and I spent more than 30 years building. After he died of heart disease, I had no one left but Ethan, my only son, and his wife, Clara. I used to think that as long as I helped them, I still had a family. Ethan is a civil engineer, gentle and quiet. Clara, my daughter-in-law, is a beautiful, sharp woman, but cold as glass. From the day they married, she made me feel like an uninvited guest in my own son's life. Even so, I did what any mother would do. I gave everything. I pulled from my savings to cover their mortgage, helped them buy a new car, and paid private school tuition for Leo. Each month, most of my pension went straight into Ethan's account to ease the burden for the young couple. And I told myself, that's a mother's joy. So when Ethan called that day, inviting me to dinner, after 3 busy months, my heart blossomed. I hadn't heard my grandson's voice for too long. Leo is 9, curly-haired, and loves my stories about when his grandpa was alive. I wanted to see him, to hold him, to hear about school. I spent the whole afternoon getting ready. I chose the navy dress, Walter once said, lights up the whole room when you wear it. I took from the wooden box the pearl necklace he gave me for our 30th anniversary. I spritzed a little lavender perfume, the scent Leo once said, "Smells like your baked treats, Grandma." Before leaving, I put the still warm apple pie and Leo's new toy car into a basket. I looked at the clock, 5:30. Enough time to take the bus across town. On the way, I couldn't stop smiling, picturing my grandson squealing when he saw the gift. When I reached their neighborhood, crimson maple leaves littered the path. A quiet pride rose in me. I had paid most of the down payment for this house. Ethan once said, "Mom, I don't know how to thank you enough." I just smiled. Your happiness is thanks enough. I rang the bell right at 6. The rain started tapping, light as a greeting. I heard footsteps, then the door opened. Clara appeared in a fitted black dress, the very one I'd given her last month. "Oh, you're here already?" she said, voice flat as water. "Of course." Ethan said dinner at 6. I brought apple pie for Leo. I smiled, hands trembling slightly from the rain. Clara glanced past me, then lowered her voice. "Actually, we have unexpected guests tonight. We're short on food, so I can help. I brought extra pie," I answered, trying to keep my voice cheerful. She gave a tight smile, turned inside, and said something. A minute later, Ethan came out. The look in my son's eyes made my heart pinch. He wouldn't meet my gaze. "Mom, I'm sorry. We have guests tonight. There's no room for you. No room for Mom." The words dropped into me like a stone. I stood there, stunned. "But you invited me, Ethan. You said, 'I know, but it's just unexpected. I'll come by tomorrow, okay?'" I felt my lips move, but no sound came out. The rain thickened. Wind swept under the porch. I hugged the basket tighter, trying to steady my hands. From inside, Leo's bright voice rang out. "Who's here, Mom?" "It's not important, honey," Clara answered, dry as dust. Not important. His grandmother not important. I stood still for a few seconds, then whispered, "I understand. I'll go." But I didn't leave right away. I stepped back under the small awning. Warm light spilled from the house. The smell of food drifted out, roast meat, wine, laughter. Inside was my family. Outside, in the cold rain, was me, a stranger. At first I thought I'd walk away, but my legs wouldn't move. I looked through the window, saw Clara pouring wine, Ethan chatting with guests, Leo sitting quietly, having no idea his grandmother was standing out there in the rain. Time crawled with cruelty. 5 minutes. 10. 30. The rain grew heavy. Water running through my hair. Icy at the nape of my neck. I tried to shield the gifts, but the wrapping paper was soaked. The toy car peeked through the clear plastic. The apple pie cooled in its box. An hour passed. Music drifted out. They played "Fly Me to the Moon," Walter's favorite. I pressed my lips together, fighting tears. After 2 hours, I began to shake with cold. 3 hours later, my legs were numb, my heart leaden. When the window cracked open, I saw Clara say something to a friend, eyes darting toward me. She smiled, not from awkwardness, but from pleasure. I saw her lips form the words, then caught a few. Let her learn not to show up uninvited. I tightened my grip on the basket handle. Something inside me, shattered then hardened to steel. I didn't scream, didn't wail, didn't cry. I took a deep breath and let the rain wash away the last of my tears. I kept standing there, hoping for a small miracle that Ethan would open the door, realize his mistake, and say, "Mom, come in." But the door stayed still. Only music from the living room, the clink of cutlery on china, and faraway laughter. I stepped up to the porch again and knocked. This time, Ethan appeared, looking flustered and tired. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said softly, eyes on the wood floor. "Tonight's really inconvenient." Before I could answer, Clara cut in from behind him. "Older folks should know when to go home." "It's raining, you'd better leave before you catch a cold." I looked straight at her. "I'm here because my son invited me, not because I'm nosy." Clara gave a thin smile. "What invitation?" Ethan only said, "Maybe. You misheard." Ethan stayed silent, didn't object, didn't defend me. He only lowered his head. In that moment, I understood silence can be crueler than words. Through the crack, I caught a glimpse of Leo on the stairs, his small face lighting up. "Grandma," he whispered, then flinched as Clara turned. "Upstairs," she snapped. "Grandma's busy, she can't talk." "But, up." He vanished around the corner. A door thudded shut, heavy as my heart hitting the floor. The rain thickened. Water seeped down my collar, freezing. The gift basket weighed on my arm. The apple pie I'd baked all afternoon was soggy, butter scent mingling with rain. The gift wrap around Leo's toy melted, sticking to my fingers. I tried to hold it together, but the red paper tore, revealing the little blue car inside, the only thing still intact. I turned to leave, then stopped when Clara's voice carried from the dining room, clear through the door. "I'm done, Ethan. She uses money like a leash. Don't you see? She always wants a hand in our business." Ethan's tired voice. "She's just helping." "Helping? Helping to control us, more like it. I'm sick of always having to thank Mom for everything. This house, this car, even Leo's tuition, all from her money. Aren't you ashamed?" Each word was a blade. I stood frozen. The baby boy I once held through feverish nights now sitting silent while his wife insulted me in the house I helped them buy. I gripped the wooden railing. A sharp ache shot through my finger joints. The rain wasn't what made me shake anymore, it was the humiliation. "Ethan, I'm serious," Clara went on. "If she had no money, do you think she'd still show up? She just needs to feel powerful." A small laugh rose from someone at the table. I didn't know who. I only knew that, in that instant, something in me broke for good. I raised my head and looked through the window, saw them eating under warm light, looking so happy. They didn't know that out there, the trembling old woman in the rain was quietly laying down the role of the generous mother they'd exploited for years. I breathed in, cold, soaking to the bone. I opened my purse and took out my phone. My hand shook, but my voice when the call connected was steady. "Hello," I said. "This is Marjorie Bennett. I need to lock all joint accounts under my name, including authorized user cards, savings, and online access. Please process it tonight." The line hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." "May I confirm?" I answered, crisp. "No reason needed. Just do it now." 7 minutes later, when I ended the call, I knew the rain had washed away not only the grime on the street, but also the last bit of naivete in me. I stood in the open, exhaled, and looked up at the lit house. They still laughed, still chatted, still lived under the illusion that I'd always be that weak woman. They didn't know in just a few hours, everything in their lives would turn, and this time, the one steering the storm would be me. I lingered under their porch a while longer, listening to the rain blend with the living room laughter, a sound so strange it hurt. Then I left, my soaked shoes slapping on the paving stones. The road home was dark, only street lights shimmering on puddles. I walked slowly, letting anger and humiliation dissolve with each step. Back home, I hung up my coat, wiped my face, and sat in the armchair by the window, Walter's spot for morning papers. The little room felt warm, but inside I was still cold. Outside, the rain didn't let up. It fell steady, stubborn, as if cleansing something too. I looked at the phone in my hand, the screen still showing the recent call to the bank. I knew I'd just done something irreversible, and strangely, I wasn't afraid. I called back, this time to confirm everything. The rep, a young woman with a gentle voice, reviewed the details. "Mrs. Marjorie Bennett, I confirm we've temporarily locked all accounts connected to your name, including savings, retirement, and any joint accounts with Mr. Ethan Bennett." I answered softly. "That's right. And I want to ensure all access, authorized cards, and transaction authorizations are frozen. No exceptions." A pause. "Ma'am, this will temporarily suspend all usage for the co-holder. Are you certain? They won't be able to withdraw, pay, or transfer anything." I looked out the window, through the blurred curtain of rain. For a moment, I could almost see their house far off in memory. Warm lights, wine glasses, laughter. And Clara's tilted head, that smug smile as she raised her glass, like toasting a victory she thought was locked in. "I'm more certain than I've ever been," I said, oddly calm. "Please mark it for tonight." "Yes, ma'am," the young woman replied. "I'll note it as urgent." "One moment, please." I heard keys clacking, a system processing, then a short stillness. "All set, Mrs. Bennett," she said. "Every account is now safely locked. Would you like us to email a confirmation?" "No need. I'll know when they call me in the morning," I murmured. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" I paused, then said, "If you have a mom, hug her one more time tonight. Don't wait until it's only rain falling to realize you've been silent too long." A quiet beat on the other end. "I will, ma'am." When the call ended, I set the phone down and let out a slow breath. A lightness flooded me, like I'd just slipped a shackle I'd worn for years without noticing. I stood, went to the kitchen, turned on the soft yellow light, and boiled water for ginger tea. The steam rose warm and spicy, soothing my chest. I cracked the window to let in night air, damp earth, and the patter on the tin roof. I sat, cupped the mug, and drifted into memory. I remembered my years as a nurse, endless night shifts, swollen feet from 8 hours on them, hands rough from rubber gloves and antiseptic. I remembered pinching pennies to buy Ethan his first school shoes, paying for his graduation suit, and quietly borrowing so he could study engineering. I never hesitated, never asked for anything back, because I believed that's what mothers do, and for 40 years I never doubted that. Until tonight. Thunder rumbled far off, low and heavy, like a weary heartbeat. I stared through the rain, remembering Ethan's averted eyes. Not the eyes of someone who hates you, the eyes of a son trapped between loyalty and cowardice. I wasn't angry with him, but the disappointment smoldered slow and deep like coals under ash. I set the cup down and switched on the small lamp in the living room. My little house, plain as it was, felt cozier than ever. No fake laughter, no snide remarks, just the warmth of my own company, and suddenly, that felt precious. On the shelf, our wedding photo still sat. Walter in a gray suit, me in a simple white dress, both of us smiling kindly. I stroked the frame and whispered, "Walter, I finally learned the lesson you tried to teach me. I can't save someone by losing myself." A tear slid down, and I didn't wipe it away. I let it fall, the way the rain was erasing the day outside. I stepped onto the porch with my warm tea. The rain had softened, steady as a lullaby. I inhaled, letting the ginger heat my chest again. In the quiet, I told myself, tomorrow they'll taste the real storm. Not because I want revenge. I just want them to understand kindness isn't a test, and a mother's silence doesn't mean weakness. I went back in, folded the bank notebook closed, and tucked it in the drawer. Lamplight reflected my face in the window, still me, but different. There was something in my eyes, a calm firmness I'd never seen there before. I turned off the light and headed to bed. The rain outside kept time like a heart. Tonight, I would sleep well. Because in the morning, when they found the accounts frozen, they'd know what it feels like to be left in the rain, and maybe then they would finally understand me. The next morning, Portland was strangely still. After a long night of rain, the air was crisp, faint with pine and damp earth. I made my coffee as usual, one strong scoop, a splash of almond milk, then sat by the window. Pale sunlight filtered through the blinds, tinting the little kitchen a soft yellow. I took a sip, the bitter spreading across my tongue. Inside, there was no anger, no sadness, just a quiet space I couldn't name, like a lake after a storm. I flipped on the small radio, a jazz tune Walter used to love. On the table, last night's ginger tea still carried a gentle scent. Then the phone rang. The tone trilled fast, insistent. I glanced at the screen, Ethan. I smiled, set down the cup, and took a steady breath before picking up. "Good morning, son," I said evenly. Ethan's voice came fast, panicked. "Mom, what happened?" "Clara's card got declined. Then the bank called saying, the accounts are frozen. My card doesn't work either. Did you do something?" I stirred my coffee, the spoon's clink ringing against porcelain. "Oh, probably a system issue," I answered slowly. "Try living without it for a bit." A half-second of silence, then Clara's voice cut in high and furious. "If you don't unlock them, I'll sue. This is theft." I raised an eyebrow and smiled. "You can try. But do check who's the primary name on the deed, the bank records, and the mortgage." Silence on the other end. I could almost hear Clara swallow. Then she shouted, voice shaking, "You'll regret this!" "Maybe," I said. "But at least this time, I won't regret staying silent." I hung up. The phone rang again right after this time, the bank confirming every account had been fully frozen per my request. I thanked them calmly and ended the call like I'd just checked off a normal task. A few minutes later, the doorbell chimed. I guessed it was no one but Helen, my neighbor of 20 years, a widow who had witnessed so many chapters of my family's story. Helen stepped in with a basket of warm bread and a gentle smile. I heard arguing from Ethan's house at dawn. Everything okay, Marge? I poured her a cup of coffee and gave her the short version. When I got to the part where Clara threatened to sue, Helen burst into bright laughter. Well, you finally did what you should have done ages ago. I didn't think you had it in you. I smiled and shrugged. I didn't either, but maybe after standing in the rain for 3 hours, anyone would find the nerve to do something different. Helen squeezed my hand, voice low. You know, people only discover their strength when there's no one left to lean on. We sat quietly for a while, listening to cars on the street and sparrows on the roof. In my small kitchen, the light washed over 2 women who'd lived through too many seasons, and in Helen's eyes, I saw a reflection of myself, calm, tired, but still proud. After Helen left, I walked around the house. Everything felt so familiar that it calmed me. Walter's bookshelf, the stack of old medical files, the embroidered curtains I'd sewn by hand. I opened the desk drawer and took out an old notebook with the will I'd written 2 years ago. I spread the paper on the table. Each line was neat and careful, the ink slightly faded where I'd signed. All assets, real estate, and savings will be transferred to my son, Ethan Bennett, and my daughter-in-law, Clara Bennett. I read it again, my lips trembling. I remembered believing, when I wrote this will, that it was how I could hold the family together. I was afraid that if I didn't give, they would drift away. Now I understand it was that unconditional giving that pushed them away from me. I picked up a pen and drew a straight line through the words Clara Bennett. Then I paused over my son's name. 1 minute, 2, 3 passed. Then I crossed that out too. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "It's not because I hate you, Ethan. It's because I want you to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I rewrote the ending. All assets will be used to establish a fund to support older adults who are financially and emotionally abused by family members. The fund will be called the Walter and Marjorie Foundation. I signed again and folded the paper carefully. Do you believe that sometimes giving to strangers is the best way to save your loved ones or at least yourself? If you were in my place, would you do the same? I truly want to hear your honest thoughts in the comments. That afternoon, I called my attorney, Mr. Harris, who had handled my real estate paperwork. When I told him I wanted to update my will, he was a little surprised but said, "I'll get the documents ready, Mrs. Bennett." I took a walk to the nearby park where the willows swayed in the breeze. Children ran around, laughter filling the air, and I sat on a wooden bench, watching the sky begin to brighten. A lightness rose in me as if I had finally taken back ownership of my life. Around noon, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't Ethan. It was Leo, my grandson. His voice was small and shaky. "Grandma, Mom said you did something that made them mad. Are you sick?" "Dad isn't saying anything, just sitting there." I swallowed hard and kept my voice warm. "No, I'm fine, Leo. I'm just teaching your parents a small lesson. You'll understand someday. Can I come over to play with you?" I smiled. "When the sun's out, I'll come get you." When I hung up, the tears finally came. Not from pain, but from tenderness for a child too young to understand the splits between adults. I wiped my eyes and told myself, "One day, you'll know I did all this so you could grow up in a world that respects those who raised you." The afternoon passed quietly. I watered the plants, reorganized the bookshelves, and wrote a few lines in my journal. Today, for the first time in years, I am bound to no one. I'm no longer a shadow behind someone else's front door. I am Marjorie Bennett, and I am free. Night fell and Portland settled into a thin mist. I brewed an herbal tea, turned on the desk lamp, and looked over the new will again. The light fell across the freshly dried signature, the strokes firm and final. Softly, I spoke to Walter. "See, I finally learned how to stand up. No shouting, no blame, just one word. Enough." I slid the new will into an envelope, sealed it, and locked it in the safe. The click of the metal lock was small, but it echoed inside me like a bell of release. Outside, the breeze stirred the curtains, and pale moonlight slipped through the window pane. I looked out at the wide sky, took a deep breath, and felt my heart beating slowly, steadily, stronger than ever. Tomorrow, I knew they would keep calling, maybe show up at my door, maybe cry, maybe rage. That was fine, because this time, I wouldn't back down. I smiled slightly, turned off the light, and told myself, they left me standing in the rain for 3 hours. Now it's their turn to feel that cold. Then I went to bed, pulled up the blanket, and slept deeply, the first real rest in years, knowing my heart was finally at peace. The next morning, Portland was still damp from the night's rain. I was making coffee when the door pounded hard enough to rattle the frame. I knew right away it was them, Ethan and Clara. I opened the door. My son stood straight with his hands in his pockets, face pale from lack of sleep. Next to him, Clara wore a long coat, makeup hurriedly done, eyes red, whether from real tears or not, I couldn't tell. I stood across the threshold, quietly looking at two people I had once believed were my family. "We just want to talk," Ethan said softly. "Fine," I answered. "Come in." But today, no one gets to dodge the truth. Inside, Helen, my neighbor, was already seated at the dining table. I'd asked her to come early. Not out of fear, but because I wanted a witness. Clara sat, hands shaking, trying to sound gentle. "Mom, it was all a misunderstanding. I didn't mean." I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what to say. I looked at her, my eyes cold. "What misunderstanding made you shut the door in my face and leave me in the rain for 3 hours? Or what misunderstanding made you call me fake, a burden, an old dog?" The air froze. Ethan turned to his wife, stunned. "Did you really say that?" I didn't answer. Helen spoke up, slow and steady. "I heard it all, Clara, through the window next door. Every word you said to your friend. That can't be called a misunderstanding." Clara quickly wiped her tears. I'm sorry, I lost control. It was too stressed, I cut in. Sorry doesn't mean anything when the person saying it can't even remember what they did. If you're sincere, repeat it, word for word. Just like you said that night. She froze, looking to Ethan for rescue. He lowered his head, silent. Helen stayed still, hands clasped on the table, eyes fixed on Clara. I'm sorry," Clara stammered. "I heard that," I said. "But I want to hear the exact words you used." Her voice tightened, shrinking to a rasp. I'm sorry for calling you fake." I said nothing. "I'm sorry for saying you were a burden." The room was so thick with tension you could hear the wall clock tick. I still didn't speak. Helen glanced down, her hands tightening, holding back anger. Clara swallowed, eyes blurring. "And I'm sorry for calling you an old dog." The last word broke into a sob. Ethan turned away, gripping the chair. I sat still, looking at the woman in front of me, not with hatred but with emptiness. Those words had once been knives, now they were only echoes. I stood, voice steady. "If you're truly sorry, kneel." Clara stared at me, incredulous. "What?" "You heard me. I don't need a performance. I don't need you to pretend. I want to know if you have enough courage to bow your head to your own wrongdoing. Are you trying to humiliate me?" She snapped, voice cracking. I held her gaze without blinking. "I'm not doing anything. I'm letting you see the same humiliation you threw at someone else." Clara stepped back. Ethan started to speak, but I cut him off. "Don't get involved, Ethan. You weren't the one humiliated that day. You were the one who stayed silent while your mother was." He froze, eyes clouded. Helen turned away with a sigh. In the small room, the rain outside grew louder, in rhythm with my steady heartbeat. I didn't shout or command. I just waited. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd leave. Then Clara's lips trembled, and she whispered, "Fine." She stepped forward slowly, each step heavy, dragging her pride along with it. "You don't have to," Ethan started, but Clara held up a hand. She stood in front of me, eyes glassy with tears, and then sank down. Her knees hit the wooden floor with a dull thud in the quiet room. Her hair was a mess. Mascara streaked black down her cheeks. Tears fell, blending with the sound of rain on the eaves. The wet, weighty sound of a storm brought low. She spoke through ragged sobs. "I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong." Ethan stood frozen, his eyes hollow. Helen glanced at me, lips pressed tight. I said nothing. I just looked, letting this image etch into my memory, not for revenge, but to remind myself that silence can be powerful when used at the right moment. The room held nothing but harsh breathing and rain. On the cold wood floor, Clara knelt, tears mixed with shame, and I knew this confrontation had finally reached its true end. The room still held the chill and scent of the morning rain as Clara knelt on the wood floor, her shoulders trembling, tears streaking through the mascara on her cheeks. I stood still, looking down at her not with the eyes of a victor, but of a mother who had finally had enough. I was quiet for a few seconds, then drew a long breath. "All right, Clara. You can stand up. I don't need you down there any longer. Now we move to part 2, the new rules." Clara lifted her head, eyes exhausted, and Ethan looked up slightly, stunned. "Rules?" he repeated. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and set both hands on the old wooden table. Helen, still there, watched in silence. The dim light from the window fell across my face, and even I knew there was no room left for pity. "That's right," I said slowly, clearly. "From today on, if you two still want to set foot in this house or have any relationship with me at all, you will follow a mother's 10 rules." Clara wiped her cheeks, voice hoarse. "Are you trying to control our whole lives?" I gave a small smile. "No, I'm taking back control of mine." Helen nodded gently in agreement. I opened the small notebook where I'd written everything last night, firm strokes like a vow. I looked straight at them. "Let's begin. First rule, no more reckless spending." I looked at Ethan. "From now on, you won't get those little bits of help every month. I worked my whole life to save, not to watch you spend it on restaurants, cars, or things that only make people look rich." Ethan started to protest, but I raised my hand. "Son, I lived on a nurse's modest paycheck and raised you, and I never owed anyone. If I could do it, so can the two of you. My money is not an open bank for anyone to withdraw from at will." Clara dropped her gaze and bit her lip. Helen quietly smiled and jotted a note on the paper beside her. "Second rule, I support Leo only, not the two of you." My voice softened a touch. "I won't let my grandson go without. Tuition, clothes, anything necessary for Leo, I'll cover it. But all payments will go directly to the school or his legal guardian, not through either of you anymore." Ethan nodded slightly. Clara looked like she wanted to speak, then only sighed. "If you truly care about your son," I said, "you'll understand this is what's best for him." Third rule, Clara has 30 days to get a job. I met her eyes. 30 days. Not to prove anything to me, but to prove you can still live on your own merits. I won't cover credit cards, shopping, or any bill. If on day 30 you still don't have a job, you will leave that house." Clara glared. "Leave my house?" I lifted my chin, calm. "That house is still in my name, Clara. You've been staying there by my grace." The air tightened. Ethan shut his eyes briefly, accepting the truth he'd avoided for years. "I'm giving you time," I said. "But don't forget, my son Mercy doesn't extend forever." Fourth rule, don't show up unless you're invited. My voice dropped. For years, I've been the one calling, sending gifts, visiting, and arranging every family gathering. From now on, if I don't invite, you don't come. Don't knock, don't pretend to drop by, don't bring a cheap gift and a fake smile. Let this house be truly quiet." Clara bowed her head, lips tight. Ethan stayed silent. Helen added a few lines, her mouth set like she was holding back a sigh. Fifth rule: one disrespectful word and all support ends forever. I leaned slightly and looked at both of them. I've had enough of insults, fake tears, and complicit silence. If there is even one more disrespectful line, I will act as if you never existed in my life. No warning, no forgiveness, no return. Helen lifted her head, looked at me. I'll bold that one, she said firmly. Clara shivered. I saw her hand clutch her coat, fear flickering under the last of her pride. Ethan said nothing, looking like a man waking from a long daze. I closed the notebook, set the pen on the table, and looked at Helen. Now I want a clear record, not a contract, a family agreement. Helen understood. She pulled a blank sheet and began writing, "Agreement between Mrs. Marjorie Bennett and her son Ethan Bennett and his wife Clara Bennett. All parties agree to the rules as stated, witnessed by Helen Porter." She read each line, steady and clear. I nodded and signed. Helen signed next, then slid the page to Ethan. He took the pen with a trembling hand. I understand, Mom," he said quietly, and signed. The pen stopped in front of Clara. She looked at me, eyes wet. "Do you really want to humiliate me this much?" I shook my head. "No, Clara. I want you to learn to respect other people's boundaries. The humiliation, that's what you sowed for yourself." She said nothing more and signed. The signature wobbled, crooked like her pride, cracking apart. Helen folded the paper into a file and said, "That's that. From now on, everything is clear." The room went still. On the porch, sunlight began to push through the clouds, reflecting on the wood floor where a faint, damp mark still showed where Clara had knelt. She stood, grabbed her purse, and said nothing. When she turned, her eyes met mine, no hatred left, only fear and shame. Ethan lowered his head, squeezed his wife's hand, and together they walked out. A light breeze crossed the porch, carrying the lingering scent of coffee through the air. Helen exhaled and said softly, "I've never seen you this strong, Marge." I smiled and answered gently, "It's not strength, Helen. I'm just too tired to be weak anymore." She nodded, her gaze softening. "These 10 rules aren't only for them. You know? They're for other mothers too, the ones who need to remember that love still needs boundaries." I looked out the window, where the first sunbeams lit the rain still clinging to the glass. Inside me rose a deep calm, not joy, but release. That day, for the first time in years, I sat in my own home, in quiet and light, and realized a mother's strength isn't about how much she sacrifices, it's about knowing when to stop. And I stopped. This time, for good. In the days that followed, spring came to Portland. Clear skies, soft winds, trees starting to bud. My life slipped back into simple rhythms I'd forgotten. Getting up early, making coffee, reading the paper, walking with Helen around the park, then coming home to cook myself lunch. No more sudden calls begging for an urgent few $100s, no more long texts listing bills due. Just quiet, pure, like the breath of freedom. I didn't know how they were managing on the other side of town, not until Helen brought the paper over and said, "You know, I saw Clara at the supermarket. She looked like she hadn't slept in days." I nodded lightly, saying nothing. I didn't feel happy, but I didn't pity her either. Sometimes life has to let people taste their own consequences. Ethan called me for the first time after nearly a week of silence. His voice was hoarse, tired. "Mom, I'm trying to get things in order. Leo's tuition is coming due, and I still can't pull it together." I sipped my tea and answered calmly, "Don't worry, I've paid the school directly. Leo won't go without." Silence on the line. I heard a soft exhale, then a quiet, "Thank you, Mom," I replied. "No need to thank me. I'm taking care of Leo, not the two of you." After that call, I knew he understood. Some wounds don't need words. Silence is enough to wake people up. 3 days later, on a damp afternoon, I was replanting a few lavender pots on the porch when I heard a car stop at the gate. I looked up, and there was Clara. No makeup, hair tied in a rush, a wrinkled coat. She walked slowly, like she was carrying a mountain of embarrassment on her shoulders. Can I come in?" I looked at her, then opened the gate. "If you're here to talk, yes." We sat in the kitchen. The air still smelled faintly of coffee. She glanced around, maybe realizing for the first time that my small house wasn't luxurious at all, but clean, tidy, and warm, a far cry from their cold, big place. "I don't know where to start," Clara said, her voice rough. "We're in real trouble. Ethan's trying, but his paycheck isn't enough. I'm only asking you for a small amount. Just this once." I set my cup down and looked her straight in the eye. "You don't need money, Clara. You need to learn self-respect." She froze. "You think I don't have self-respect?" "I don't think." "I see." I spoke slowly. "You've lived on other people's money so long you forgot what it feels like to stand on your own 2 feet. You think money fixes everything, when really it just covers a hole inside you." Clara went quiet, her eyes flickering between anger and shame. "You don't understand. I used to have a job. I used to have dignity. But after I married Ethan, I thought I could stay home with our child, take care of the house." I cut in, gentle but firm. "You didn't take care of your child. You took care of your pride." A heavy pause. She bit her lip, then whispered, "I've been looking for work. But all they offer are manual jobs, retail, server. I can't. I don't want the pitying looks. It's beneath me." I gave a small smile, not angry. "Beneath you?" I stood, went to a cabinet and took out an old photo frame. In the picture, it's me in a nurse's uniform, hollow-cheeked, hands cracked, holding a mop. "See this? I scrubbed hospital floors for 20 years. I changed adult diapers, bathed the dying, cleaned wounds most people couldn't stand to look at. I did it so your husband could eat and study. And not once did I feel beneath anyone." Clara lowered her head, her hands clenched together. I saw tears start to fill her eyes, but she held them back. "I'm not ashamed of being poor, Clara," I went on, softer. "I'm ashamed when someone who can work chooses to bow to money instead." She sighed, voice shaking. "You're strong. I can't be like that." I pulled my chair closer and sat beside her. "You think I was born strong? No. I was weak too. I cried when people looked down on me, but I never forgot one thing. People only belittle you when you allow them to." That sentence broke her. This time, the tears weren't for show. She bent her head, shoulders shaking, real sobs breaking loose. I let her be no pat on the shoulder, no soothing words. I let her cry like a child because sometimes only at the bottom of pride can someone finally see who they are. After a few minutes, she looked up, eyes swollen, voice raw. I don't know where to start." I smiled gently. "Anywhere. A coffee shop, a corner store, the bakery down the block. No one says you have to start at the top. What matters is that you actually start." She stayed quiet. Her eyes drifted to the wood floor, the same spot where, weeks ago, she'd knelt in humiliation. Now, a thin ray of afternoon sun slipped through the door and lit a small streak across it. Clara saw it, and so did I. I spoke slowly, low and warm. "Self-respect can't be borrowed, Clara. It only arrives when you stand up and earn your first meal without putting out your hand. The day you do that, you'll understand what I'm saying now." She nodded, said nothing, just whispered, "I'll try." I stood, refilled our water, then looked at her one last time before she left. "You don't need to thank me. Thank yourself for being ashamed at the right time." She pressed her lips together and left. Her steps were slow, but steadier than when she arrived. I stood at the door and watched her disappear under the trees. Helen called over from next door. Was that her again? I nodded. Yes, and maybe for the first time, she didn't come here to perform. Helen smiled and waved. I always knew you could make people change without raising your voice. I answered softly, half to her, half to myself. No one changes in a day, Helen. But today, I saw her first real tears, and maybe that's the start of something. I went back inside and made another cup of tea. Outside, evening fell. Light spilled onto the wooden porch, a peaceful scatter of gold. I sat down, light as a cloud. Maybe true forgiveness doesn't come from pity, it comes from daring to look at someone in their weakest moment and believing they can be better than yesterday. And I knew that somewhere, in Clara's shame today, a seed of change had been planted. One May morning, while I was making coffee, a soft knock sounded at the door. Not the hard, tense pounding Clara used. This knock was hesitant, almost afraid of being turned away. I opened it. Ethan stood there, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a wrinkled shirt. He bowed his head and rasped, "Mom, can I come in?" Looking at my son, my heart gave a quick, sharp beat, not out of pity, but because in that worn-out posture, I knew he was finally seeing what he used to ignore. I nodded. "Come in, Ethan. This door has never been locked to you." He sat at the kitchen table, where the smell of fresh coffee still hung. I poured him a cup. His hands shook so much, a few drops splashed. He lifted it to his lips but didn't drink. I don't know where to start," he said, voice cracking. "Everything's worse than ever." I waited. "Clara," he drew a deep breath, "she can't find a job and she blames me. Yesterday she called me useless in front of Leo, said I live off my mother, that I'm an embarrassment to her friends." He lowered his head and covered his face. "Mom, I can't take it anymore. Every time I try to talk, she starts yelling, brings up the money, the house, all the things I know you gave. I didn't say anything, just set my hand on his shoulder. Now you see, don't you? When money disappears, real love either shows up or it disappears with it." Ethan looked up, eyes red. "You're right. I was blinded. I thought she just needed love, needed to feel safe. Turns out what she needed wasn't a person next to her, it was a life she could show off." He let out a bitter laugh. "I was foolish, Mom. I thought siding with my wife proved I was a grown man, but really I let her control us both." I looked at my son, aching and relieved at once. He was cutting the cord that had bound him for years, late but brave. I poured more coffee and asked, "Ethan, do you want to live in fear or in truth?" He looked confused. "I don't understand." "You do," I said slowly. "You're afraid of losing her, afraid of breaking, afraid Leo won't have his mother. But you forget what you're trading away. You're letting yourself be diminished day after day. Is that living?" He stayed quiet. Sunlight slid through the window onto his face, thinner than before. I spoke softly. "Do you remember, Ethan, when you were little and I worked night shifts for weeks? I'd come home smelling like antiseptic, hair damp with sweat, and you'd run to me and say, 'Mom's a superhero.' You were proud of me for doing what you couldn't imagine. Now tell me, are you proud of yourself?" He bowed his head, said nothing. A tear fell and dotted the back of his hand. "No," he whispered. "I'm not the man you raised me to be. I let Clara control everything. I know she's wrong, but I'm scared to make her mad, scared to lose the perfect family people see. I've never really been a strong husband." I touched his hand lightly and murmured, "Admitting that means you've started to change." He nodded, breathing deep. "I just don't know where to start, Mom." I stood, went to my desk, and took out a small envelope. I set it in front of him. "This is a copy of the agreement from the other day. Not to throw in anyone's face, but to remind you that boundaries are now clear. No one gets to blame the past anymore." Ethan opened it, eyes landing on Clara's shaky signature. He gave a sad smile. She signed it, but she didn't get it. To her, everything's a power game. I sat across from him, voice firm. "No one can take your power unless you hand it over." You handed it over with your silence. Ethan nodded, voice tight. I understand. Just then, the landline rang. I saw the caller ID, Leo's school. I picked up. Mrs. Bennett, we're calling to inform you Leo's tuition for this term is still unpaid. We've tried to reach his parents without success. I glanced at Ethan. He looked flustered, mouthing an apology. I spoke into the phone, steady. Thank you for calling. Please contact Leo's parents directly. I won't step in for them this time. I hung up. Ethan stared, unsure. Mom, I thought you were still helping with Leo? I am, Ethan. But I can't keep paying for choices you won't take responsibility for. If you want Leo to have a future, his parents need to learn how to earn it. He bowed his head, didn't argue. Silence stretched, thick enough to hear the clock tick. I turned away, poured more coffee, and spoke slowly. Ethan, I'm giving you 72 hours. In the next 3 days, you decide. Either she changes, or you leave. There's no third option. If you stay in a marriage you know is rotten, you're teaching Leo to endure mistakes instead of fixing them. He looked up, eyes wide. 72 hours? Yes, I don't need an answer now, but at the end of 3 days I want you here not to cry, but to tell me what you chose, because this time I won't rescue you. I walked to the window. Outside, the sun began to break through. Light danced on the leaves, and across Ethan's face, the face I'd shielded for 40 years, now like a child learning to step on his own. He sat there a long time. Then he spoke, voice rough. Do you believe in me, Mom? I turned and met his eyes. Since the day you were born, I've believed in you. The trouble is, I believed too much while you didn't believe in yourself. Ethan gave a sad smile, tears sliding down. I think I'm starting to understand you. I nodded. Good. I don't need a dutiful son anymore. I need a man who protects his own dignity. We sat in silence a few more minutes. I heard the clock shift. The wind tapped the window. When Ethan stood, he seemed different, not strong yet, but with a resolve in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. I'll talk to Clara, he said, steady. Not to. Fight to face the truth. I can't let Leo grow up in a house full of fear. I looked at my son, worried and proud. Remember, Ethan, real change begins in silence. But after that, it has to be action. He nodded and stepped out. As his figure faded into the morning sun, I stood there, hand on the doorframe, feeling a mix of hurt and relief. My sun was cracking, but in those cracks, the first light of awakening was finding its way in, and I knew that if he dared to keep that light, everything would change. 3 days passed since Ethan came to see me. I didn't call or text, partly to keep my word to let him decide, and partly because I knew what was happening in his house was harsher than any storm outside. On the third morning, while I was trimming lavender on the porch, Clara's familiar silver car screeched to a stop at the gate. The door flung open, and she stepped out, not pathetic like when she came begging, but furious, almost unhinged. You ruined my family, she shouted, her voice ringing down the street. I calmly set the shears in the soil and brushed off my hands. Good morning, Clara. You're early. Don't pretend to be polite. She marched toward me, face flushed, hands shaking. This is all your fault. Since you cut the money, everything fell apart. Ethan wants a divorce, Leo's distant, and it's all because of you. I stood, facing her, my eyes steady, my voice strangely calm. Clara, I didn't ruin your family. I just cut off the money. The rest you did yourself. Her mouth fell open. For a few seconds, nothing came out. A breeze blew, sticking a few strands of messy hair to her smudged lipstick. I went on, even and clear, like explaining to a child. Families don't break because of a lack of money. They break because of a lack of respect. If you truly loved Ethan, you'd stand by him, even when he had nothing. But clearly, what you loved wasn't him. It was the life he could give. Thank you, while his mother stood behind him. Clara stepped back half a pace, eyes flashing between anger and shame. You don't get it. I just want a better life, not to scrape by like poor people. I raised an eyebrow. And who do you think I am? I hauled trash in hospital rooms, mopped bathrooms, and ate cold meals for 20 years to raise your husband. I don't think being poor is degrading. I think holding your head high while living off others is what's truly pitiful. The air thickened. Clara opened her mouth to fire back, but no words came. I looked at her, tired but not angry. You have two paths, Clara. Keep blaming others, or start living honestly. Choose. She pressed her lips together, turned, and walked off, her high heels sinking into the wet lawn, leaving muddy tracks across the stone path. The engine roared, and the car shot away, the smell of burnt rubber hanging in the morning air. I let out a long breath, not a sigh of relief, but the kind of breath from someone who knows the biggest battle has only just begun. That afternoon, I got a call from Ethan. His voice was low, tired, but steady. Mom, I said it already. I don't want Leo growing up in a house full of fighting anymore. I stayed quiet. On the other end, I could hear him exhale, with Leo's faint crying in the background. She went crazy, Mom. Threw things, cursed me out, said I'm useless, a failed man who's run by his mother. I didn't answer back. I just packed Leo's things and left. His voice tightened. Mom, I've wasted too many years trying to prove I'm right. Now I just want peace. I closed my eyes and gripped the receiver. You did the right thing, Ethan. She said she's leaving the house, Mom. She said she didn't get married to live like poor people. A sharp sadness pricked me, but I only breathed out softly. Then let her go. Don't hold on to someone who chose to walk away when you're at your weakest. He was quiet for a moment, then said softly, I'm on my way to you. I straightened up the small upstairs room that used to be Ethan's when he was little. Fresh sheets, a hint of lavender. I set a teddy bear on the bed. Leo's old toy was still here. As I was pulling the curtains, Ethan's car stopped at the gate. He got out, carrying Leo. The boy pressed his face into his father's shoulder, worn out and puffy from crying. I opened the door, and my heart squeezed when I saw those young eyes looking at me surprised and searching for a safe place. Grandma, Leo blurted, then hurried over and hugged my legs. I bent down and held him tight. It's okay, sweetheart. It's going to be okay. Ethan stood behind him with a small suitcase in hand. Mom, we'll just stay a few days until I find somewhere else. I looked at him and shook my head lightly. This is your home, Ethan. You don't need permission to come back. He lowered his head, eyes red. It took me years to figure that out. That night, after putting Leo to bed, Ethan sat with me in the living room. The warm lamplight fell across his face, still the same boy I once knew, only now marked by the wear of adulthood. Mom, I'm sorry, he said quietly. I was blind. I let my wife insult you. I left you standing outside in the rain, and I stayed silent. I deserved to lose everything. I set my hand on his. No, Ethan, you haven't lost everything. You still have Leo, and you still have me. What you lost today was just the illusion of a fake happiness. He nodded, eyes far away. I thought marriage was where you find peace, but maybe sometimes it's where you learn to love yourself better. I smiled faintly. If you understand that, then divorce isn't an ending, it's a beginning. Meanwhile, Clara, I heard she'd applied to be a server at a small diner downtown. Helen told me she showed up to apply in broken heels, empty eyes, and a shaky voice. The owner looked at her, shook his head, then nodded out of pity. A week later, when I happened to pass by, I saw her outside the place, in a black uniform, hair tied back, a tray in hand. No lipstick, no arrogance, just a woman learning how to start over. She saw me and froze, eyes widening. I didn't stop. I just gave a small nod. In that brief moment, something flickered in her gaze. Not hatred anymore, but recognition. Maybe, at last, she understood. Sometimes freedom begins with what we lose. That night, once everything settled, I carried Leo upstairs. He'd fallen asleep, his head on my shoulder, breathing steady and warm. I laid him down, pulled up the blanket, and sat a moment, looking at that small face so much like his father's when he was little. Ethan stood in the doorway, leaning on the frame, relief in his eyes. "He's sleeping well," I said. "I don't think he's slept this peacefully in months," he answered. I nodded, brushing Leo's hair. "See, peace isn't something we chase down. It comes when we dare to let go of what hurts us." Ethan was quiet, eyes wet. "Mom, I'm grateful." I smiled gently and shook my head. "Don't thank me. Live in a way that honors it. This peace isn't only for me, it's for Leo too." He bowed his head. "I promise." I switched off the light and pulled the door almost shut. Outside, the night wind moved softly through the willows, carrying a sweet hint of lavender from the porch. I sat on the sofa with a throw across my legs. For the first time in years, the house was truly quiet. No more shouting, no more tears, no more pretending. Only the steady breathing of my grandson upstairs and my heart, peaceful, warm, whole. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Peace has come back." And this time I knew it would stay. A year passed since the night Ethan and Leo moved in with me. Life for the three of us in our little Portland home was calm, simple, and full of warmth. Every morning I got up early to make breakfast for the two of them, oatmeal for Leo, black coffee for Ethan, and a cup of ginger tea for me. We ate to birdsong on the porch and pale sunlight slipping through the curtains. The house no longer echoed with fights, only with laughter and the small, everyday sounds of family. Ethan worked steadily at an engineering office downtown, no longer pressured to keep up a showy life. And Leo, my grandson, transferred to the neighborhood public school, a small, friendly place. Every afternoon I picked him up at the gate. He'd run toward me, backpack bouncing, shouting, "Grandma, today my teacher said I write the best in class." I laughed and patted his head. "Is that because you got your storytelling from me?" He nodded, beaming. One evening at dinner, Leo suddenly said in his clear little voice, "I like this house better, Grandma." "Here." No one yells. That short sentence made both Ethan and me go still. I looked at my son and saw the corner of his mouth tremble, his eyes rimmed red. I set my hand on his shoulder and said softly, "See, Ethan, kids only need peace, not a castle." He bowed his head and murmured, "I know, Mom." From that day on, I understood the most precious thing I'd kept wasn't the house, not the money, it was the peace growing in the hearts of the two men I love most. That fall, I did something I never thought I would. I started a club for older women called Grandmothers Rising. The idea came while chatting with Helen on a slow afternoon. She laughed. "Do you know your story has spread through the whole neighborhood? The ladies at church keep asking me, how did Marjorie dare to cut the money and the control like that?" I chuckled. "Dare? I just did what I should have done long ago." Helen shrugged. "Then teach others how to do it." I thought about it and she was right. So I wrote a small notice and posted it on the church board. "Have you been used or dismissed because of your age or your kindness? Come talk with me, Marjorie Bennett. We'll learn how to say enough without feeling guilty." The first meeting had only 3 people, me, Helen, and Mrs. Jensen, an 80-year-old widow whose daughter-in-law controlled her bank accounts. We sat in my living room, drank tea, told stories, and laughed until we cried. The second meeting had 7, the third 12. Then the number kept growing until we had to borrow the church hall to fit everyone. I taught basic money management, how to read bank forms, and most importantly, how to protect themselves from family who abuse their love. One day, Mrs. Jensen squeezed my hand, tears falling. "Thank you, Marjorie. Yesterday, for the first time, I told my son no when he asked to borrow money, and you know what? I still slept like a baby." I smiled and squeezed back. "See? No isn't a cruel word. It's the first word of freedom." Grandmother's Rising became a lifeline for dozens of older women in the area. Many came just to listen, to be heard, to know they weren't alone in being used, dismissed, or told they were useless. One morning after a session, a woman named Linda came up to me, eyes wet. "Mrs. Bennett, I just want to say, your story saved me. I watched your interview on the local channel, and the next day I told my husband, I'm not signing any more loan papers." I laughed and hugged her. "Good job, Linda. Sometimes just stopping means you've already won." In December, when Portland wore a light coat of snow, I got a handwritten envelope, rare in a world of email. The slanted, careful script read, "To Mrs. Marjorie Bennett." I opened it, and my heart dipped at the first line. It was Clara. "Mrs. Marjorie, I don't know if you want to read this, but I still want to write. After leaving Ethan, I had to live the life I feared most, poor, tired, and alone. But only then did I understand how right you were. I used to look down on serving tables, yet now I'm grateful it taught me the value of sweat. I used to think self-respect was a luxury. Now I know it's the one asset no one can take. Thank you. Because of you, I learned to be independent. Clara." I finished reading and sat quietly for a long time. Outside, snow fell gently against the window, soft and pure, like forgiveness. I folded the letter and set it by the old family photo, not to cling to the past, but to remind myself, forgiveness isn't because they deserve it, it's because I deserve peace. A few months later, I was invited by the Portland Department of Social Services. They wanted me as an advisor for the Senior Dignity Program. The call came from a young manager named Allison. Her voice was eager. "We need you to share your story and help design financial workshops for seniors. Would you be willing?" I laughed. "I'm 70, Allison." She answered right away, "Which is exactly why we need you." I said yes. Not for recognition, but because if my story could help even one woman stand up, all those painful years would be worth it. My first talk was in a small community center hall. About 70 people attended, mostly silver-haired women, a few men with their wives. I wore the navy dress, the one I chose on the night everything changed. When I stepped on stage, my heart beat slow but steady. I looked out at hundreds of eyes, tired, hurt, but still bright with hope. I smiled and began, "My name is Marjorie Bennett. I'm 70, and I lost almost everything before I learned how to keep myself." The room went quiet. I told my story, no dramatics, no chest beating, just pieces of real life. The rain the night I was turned away, the quiet hours, freezing accounts, and the moment I watched my grandson sleep safely in my arms. When I finished, I said, "Loving yourself isn't selfish. It's how you save yourself from being forgotten. When we learn to say, 'Enough,' we don't lose anyone, we simply find the person we used to be." The hall erupted in applause. Many stood, tears flowing. An elderly woman came up, hugged me tight, and whispered, "Thank you, Marjorie. I'm going home to say enough to my 50-year-old son." I smiled and hugged her back. In that moment, I knew I had truly been reborn, not through money or status, but through the courage to live honestly. That evening, when I got home, I found Leo at the table doing homework. Ethan sat beside him reading. The small room glowed warm with lamplight, the scent of ginger tea drifted everywhere. I sat down, opened my laptop, and replayed a clip from the talk. Near the end, there was a moment where I looked straight into the camera and said, "If you're listening and you feel forgotten, remember, old age isn't a period at the end of your life. It's a chapter you can write with your own hand. Don't let anyone else hold the pen." I closed the screen and smiled softly. Outside, Portland was quiet. Moonlight spilled onto the porch, glinting on the lavender I replanted last year. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, and felt full of peace. At 70, I'm no longer the woman standing outside my son's door in the rain. I am Marjorie Bennett, the woman who learned to stand tall, love herself, and help others do the same. Life doesn't end with age. Sometimes it's only just beginning. It's been over a year since my life turned. Life for the three of us, me, Ethan, and Leo, is completely different now. The little house at the end of Magnolia Street where I lived alone for so many years is always full of a child's laughter. Every morning, as sunlight filters through the curtains, Leo runs barefoot into the yard, feet on the wet grass, shouting, "Grandma, I love you most in the world." That sentence melts my heart, and all the humiliation and loneliness of that rainy night suddenly feel worth it. I often watch him play and think, if I'd been weak that day, this boy might not be smiling like this now. Ethan now has a steady job at a construction firm. He's paid off his debts, lives simply, and spends more time with his son than with work or status. Every time he holds Leo, I see something in his eyes, no longer fear or shame, but deep gratitude. One evening, as we sat on the porch, he said, "Mom, I lost my wife, but I found you, and I found myself." I just smiled and said nothing. Sometimes a mother's greatest happiness isn't in apologies, it's in seeing her son finally grow up in character. One early autumn afternoon, Leo brought home a writing assignment. He waved the fresh, inky paper, excited. "Grandma, my teacher gave us, write about your hero. Guess who I chose?" I smiled, pretending to ponder. "Your dad?" "No." He shook his head, eyes bright. "My grandma." I laughed and ruffled his hair. "So what can your hero do?" He read aloud, voice clear as morning light. "My hero is my grandma. She taught me that kindness doesn't mean staying quiet." I froze. For a second, my throat tightened. Those simple, clumsy words held the meaning of my whole life. I turned away, wiped my tears, and whispered, "You did great, Leo. I'm proud of you." I didn't cry from pain, but from happiness. I once stood alone in cold rain, but in that moment, I knew the rain had washed everything clean to make room for a new spring. In the years that followed, I kept hosting small talks for older women in the neighborhood. We still called the group Grandmothers Rising. Grandmothers who stand up. No stage, no spotlights. Just a few dozen wooden chairs around a table, a pot of hot tea, and stories so real they ached. One elderly woman said, "I just told my 35-year-old daughter enough after 20 years of unconditional support." Another shared, "I got divorced last week, at 68, because I'm done hearing, 'You can't do anything anymore.'" Every meeting was a journey of release. I realized strength doesn't spread through money, it spreads through courage. When one woman dares to stand up, 10 others start to believe they can too. One winter day, while I was sorting papers, Helen brought an envelope. "For you, from California," she said. I opened it, and my heart dipped at the familiar line, "Clara." I took a deep breath and began to read. "Marjorie, for the past 2 years I've worked in a restaurant and paid my own way. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for forcing me to grow up, because otherwise I'd still be a selfish woman who only knows how to blame others. I'm getting remarried now this time, to someone who truly loves me, not my money. Wishing you peace, Clara." When I finished, I went still. A breeze at the window stirred the white curtain, carrying a faint scent of lavender through the room. I folded the letter, set it beside my late husband's photo, and smiled softly. Forgiveness isn't because they deserve it, it's because I deserve peace. I whispered as if speaking to his spirit, "Frank, that girl finally understands." Maybe every trial we endured left something good for someone else. A few months later, the local paper unexpectedly ran a story about me, titled, "A 70-year-old woman who's changing how hundreds of families treat their parents." They called me Portland's inspiration. I just smiled. I'm no hero, I'm a mother who was once left in the rain and then learned to hold an umbrella for herself. That article spread faster than I expected. Soon after, I received an invitation to join the Senior Dignity Program, a project supporting seniors who are financially abused. The program lead called and spoke with warm respect. "Mrs. Bennett, we heard your story and believe you can help many people find their own voice again." I agreed without hesitation. From someone who was hurt, I became someone who helps others find shelter in the sun. Now I understand one thing clearly: kindness is not the same as endurance. I teach Leo that every day. One afternoon, as we were walking through the park hand in hand, he asked, "Grandma, when I grow up, how do I make sure I don't treat people badly like my mom did?" Such an innocent question, yet it tightened my heart. I sat down, looked at him for a long moment, then answered softly, "Just remember that respect begins with thank you. When you're grateful to people, you'll never take them for granted." He nodded, eyes shining. I believe the seed of kindness was planted at just the right time. Life at 70 is simple and full. In the morning, I drink coffee on the porch and listen to the birds. In the afternoon, I walk with Helen and we share old stories. At night, I read letters from everywhere, women telling me my story helped them stand up, say enough, or simply believe they still matter. Every message is a small ray of light. A woman in Texas wrote, "Mrs. Marjorie, I stopped sending money to my son after 10 years. I think you'd be proud of me." A lady in Florida messaged, "Thank you. I divorced after 40 years of insults, and now I'm learning piano." I'm 72. I read every line and the tears fell on their own, not from sorrow but from gratitude because I didn't let that long-ago rainstorm put out my fire. I looked straight into the camera during the final taping for the Senior Dignity Project. My voice shifted gently toward the audience, as if speaking directly to you, the one watching this story. If you've stayed with me to this point, maybe you've loved someone so much you forgot yourself. But please remember, kindness shouldn't become a chain. Sometimes saying enough isn't an ending, it's the beginning of freedom. I paused, letting my breath fall in step with the listener's heartbeat. Outside the window, a light rain began, each drop tapping the wood frame like a familiar tune. I turned to the audience and smiled with all the peace I have. I'm Marjorie Bennett, 70 years old, and this is my story how one rainy night turned me from weak to free. If this story touched you, tell me where you're watching from. I truly want to know how far it's traveled. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, or tap like if you believe justice sometimes begins with a heart that's hurt but unbroken. Thank you for listening to the voice of a 70-year-old mother who learned that loving herself is also a way to love her family. I looked up at the window. The rain still fell gently, but this time I didn't feel cold. I felt my heart full of light, the light of forgiveness, of freedom, and of the women rising with me all over the world. I whispered, as if to everyone who has endured yet still believes in goodness, that rainy night is over. But its legacy is hearts that are no longer afraid. There are wounds that don't bleed. They simply etch themselves into the face of a mother who once loved too much. That day, I heard my daughter speak, her voice sweet as dew but cold as steel. "Mom, sign it. Let us hold this beach house to keep it safe." On the table lay a transfer contract, the house worth $300,000, the dream I'd spent half a lifetime to dare to touch. I looked at my 2 children, once the light of my life, now 2 strangers counting digits in their mother's eyes. I didn't cry. I poured more tea, smiled softly, and set my hand on the recorder button fixed under the table. Outside, the waves kept breaking steady like my heart, slow, steady, and no longer afraid. Because sometimes, the moment you realize family ties also have a price is when you finally learn the true value of freedom. And I just sat there, calmly watching the first day of their payback begin. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Josephine Myers, 67 years old, living in Clearwater, Florida, where the sea is crystal blue and the wind tastes as salty as memory. For 10 years, Mother's Day has been nothing more than a quiet morning to me. No knock at the door, no flowers delivered, only the ticking wall clock and the old air conditioner's soft breath. I still woke early as usual, brewed coffee, set the table, and laid out the hand-embroidered cloth my mother left me, a habit no one remembered but me. I arranged white porcelain plates, set out butter cookies and a tray of fresh strawberries. I cooked Southern-style beef stew, the dish Lauren and Tyler once fought over as kids. Back then, whenever I made it, we'd sit around the table and laugh late into the night. Now, that kitchen held only the sound of a spoon tapping the pot and the smudged noise of fading memories. By 10 a.m., I checked my phone only to see a blank screen. No texts, no calls. I opened Facebook, telling myself maybe my kids were busy. Then a photo popped up right on top: Lauren, my daughter, at a fancy restaurant in Tampa, holding a glass of champagne, with Tyler and their friends beside her. The caption read, "Perfect Sunday with the people who matter most." I looked at that line 3-4 times until it blurred with the steam from my cup. The people who matter most. And I wasn't in that frame. I set the phone on the table and looked at the stew simmering gently. The smell of onion, garlic, carrots. Once the scent of family had become the smell of loneliness, seasoned to perfection. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just felt a very soft crack inside, like wind splitting a window pane. No one heard it but me. That afternoon, I took my meal out to the porch, watched the empty street, and felt hollow as cars drifted by. I thought, maybe next year will be different. Maybe they're just busy. But then memories rolled back like a slow film. Last year, my daughter texted me at 11 p.m. "Sorry, Mama. The day got away from one. Love you." Tyler stayed silent all day. Then a week later sent a short line. "Been busy, Mom." I realized their forgetting wasn't accidental anymore. It was a habit, grown large by my own silence. That night, I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the fan spin. I asked myself, when did I disappear from their lives? When they got married? When money arrived? Or when I stopped lending? I had sold my wedding ring to pay Lauren's tuition, mortgaged the house to help Tyler open a garage, and thought that was love. Turns out those sacrifices taught them that mom is a given. The next morning I brewed coffee, but this time I skipped the usual milk. I wanted that bitterness to remind me it was time to wake up. I pulled out an old folder where I kept a few shares from my old company and a savings book I'd never touched. After doing the math, I saw I had enough $300,000, enough to buy a small beach house where I could start over. No one needed to know. No one needed permission. I booted up my old computer, checked Zillow, and scrolled through hundreds of listings. When I saw a white wooden house with 2 bedrooms and a big porch facing the sea, I stopped. Asking price, $299,000. Short description: a peaceful coastal home for a new beginning. I smiled. Maybe this was the invitation meant for me. I called Denise Harper, a local real estate agent who had helped my friend a few years back. Denise heard my voice and said, "If you truly want peace, I have a place that matches exactly what you sent. I think you'll love it." 2 days later, I took a bus for over 3 hours to St. Augustine, the oldest seaside city in America. The wind carried salt and a hint of jasmine from somewhere, and I felt lighter by the minute. The house sat on a small street shaded by palms. The white paint had yellowed, but the frames were solid. Denise opened the door with a warm smile. "Welcome to your new beginning." As I stepped in, the sound of waves drifted from afar, blending with wind teasing the windows, the kind of sound that makes you believe in good things. I said only 4 words. I want to buy. A week later, the contract was done. I signed with a slightly shaky hand, but my heart felt light as air. For the first time in years, I did something just for me. Not for my kids, not for anyone, not to prove a thing. Denise hugged me in congratulations. But before leaving, she looked at me and said seriously, "Josephine, I say this because I care. When you move in, find your own attorney to make sure no one can challenge your ownership. I've seen too many people lose their assets to their own kids." I smiled, thinking it was just professional caution. But that night, when I played Tyler's voicemail, "Hey Mom, heard you bought a house. Must be nice having all that money saved up," my heart went cold. The next morning, I called Denise. She referred me to attorney Maya Chen, 35 years old, who specializes in protecting seniors' rights. At our first meeting, Maya sat across from me, clear and steady. "Miss Josephine, what you described, distant children who suddenly care when assets appear, is a classic pattern of financial abuse within families. I suggest creating a trust and setting up an evidence protection system. The sooner, the better." I nodded. We worked on the documents together. Maya helped me open a personal fund, set up legal powers of attorney, and install home security cameras. She even helped me buy a small recorder, a coin-sized button I could stick under the table. A week later, I moved into the new beach house. In the mornings, I opened the windows, breathed in the salt, and listened to gulls crying in the distance. I started a journal, recording each day as proof of my new life. For the first time in years, I didn't need a text message to know I still existed. Then, this year's Mother's Day came around again. I expected nothing, just planned a small lunch for myself: clam chowder and butter cookies. At 11 a.m., the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Lauren and Tyler stood there with a man in a black suit, a briefcase in his hand. "Hi, Mom. We thought we'd surprise you." They hugged me lightly. Lauren's perfume drowned out the sea breeze. We sat at the table. I poured tea and asked gently, "It's been a while since you dropped by." Lauren smiled. "I just want to make sure you're safe in this house." I was surprised when the man opened his case and pulled out a stack of papers. "This is a transfer agreement. You just need to sign so they can hold it for you, avoid scams." I looked at the pages, tiny print and blank lines, waiting for my signature. Tyler added with a hint of pity, "We only want what's best for you. $300,000 isn't a small amount." I set the cookie plate down and looked at them one by one. In that moment, all the years of sacrifice, cold dinners, nights waiting by the phone, played backward like an old film. I said nothing. I just poured more tea, smiled, and let my hand slide under the table to brush the recorder button. The soft click blended with the distant surf. Outside, sunlight flickered on the tea like a small flame. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd sign today. But they didn't know that on this Mother's Day, they hadn't come to take. They'd come to start facing the price of what they'd done. Sometimes I ask myself, when do people start walking away from you when they leave home, or the moment they stop listening? After that Mother's Day lunch, when my children left behind half-finished teacups and an unsigned contract, I sat a long time in the kitchen. The scent of butter cookies still lingered, but the warmth had gone long ago. I looked out at the sea as sunlight slanted across the water, and the old years began to rewind in my mind, like a faded film. I once believed we were a small, happy family, just the 3 of us, but full of love. After my husband left for a younger woman, I had no time to cry. I worked 2 jobs, by day at a grocery store, by night cleaning hospital rooms. I remember the late shifts, the disinfectant soaking into my hands and thinking, as long as Lauren and Tyler get a proper education, it's all worth it. Lauren was the good student, the one with kind words. I sold my wedding ring, the last piece of jewelry from happier times, to pay her college tuition. I smiled and said, "One day you'll wear another ring, not to recall the past, but to start a future." She hugged me, promising she'd take care of me after graduation. I believed her. Tyler, my only son, had skillful hands and loved cars from the start. When he said he wanted to open a repair garage, I took out a bank loan and mortgaged the old house. I thought, if I push a few more years, he'll have a career. I didn't know that was the moment I signed an open-ended contract of sacrifice. Time passed, and while I lived by a packed work schedule, their calendars began to be empty of me. On holidays they'd say, "Mom, plans changed this year, we're traveling with friends." The first time I pretended to be cheerful, "Go ahead, I'm fine at home." The second time I only asked, "When will you be back?" By the third time I stopped asking. I still cooked full dinners and set 2 extra plates, habits of a mother who hadn't caught up to the fact that her kids had grown. Year by year, those plates stayed spotless from start to finish because no one sat down. On my birthday, Lauren sent one single text, a cake emoji, a heart, no message, no call. I stared at it, imagining her face as she hit send, probably just a few seconds between a meeting or lunch with coworkers. Tyler was worse, he forgot. 3 days later, when I texted, "How are you?" he replied with 3 words. "Very busy, Mom." I asked myself, when did I slip out of their frame? Was it when they got their own homes, their own families? Or when I stopped answering loan requests and started saying no? I remember Lauren once came over, hugged me tight, and said she urgently needed $500 to pay the electric bill. I pulled out the cash, even though I had a little over $600 in my wallet. She promised to pay it back by the weekend. That weekend came and went, then the next month, then the next year, the promise buried under silence. Tyler was the same. Whenever the garage struggled, he'd call, "Mom, I just need a little. You understand?" I understood, and I gave. Until one day I opened my expense notebook and saw a total that stunned even me, over $70,000 in 4 years. I gave a sad smile. Not because I regretted the money, but because I realized love and trust had been drained, with nothing returned. I started screenshotting every text and saving call logs as a way to keep proof, not to sue, but to remind myself never to forget the truth. I created a folder on my computer called Silent Years. Whenever I felt weak, I opened it and reread each line. "Mom, it's urgent. Just this once. I'm busy. Talk later," and I remembered why I had to be strong. Neighbors sometimes asked, "Haven't seen your daughter visit?" I just smiled. I learned to cushion the question with a smile. Inside, though, each question snipped one more thread tying me to hope. I stopped setting the table for ghosts, stopped calling just to hear a half-hearted voice, stopped waiting for goodnight texts. One summer evening, I watched a travel show about Florida beach homes. The sunset on the screen made me want to live again, not as a forgotten mother, but as a woman who still deserves peace. I opened my computer and created a new folder titled Coast Plan. I wrote out each line. Estimated home price, $300,000. Furniture, minimal, self-decorated. Home insurance, choose expanded safety coverage. Moving costs, $2,500. Emergency fund, $15,000 for legal situations. I wrote with a shaky hand, but each word was a piece of strength I took back for myself. I began selling what I didn't need. The vintage teacup collection, a few old paintings, the armchair my husband used to sit in, posted them all online. The house grew emptier, and strangely, I could breathe better than ever. The more space I cleared, the louder I heard my own voice. "You've endured enough, Josephine." Each morning, I opened the window to sunlight falling on a table set for one. I brewed coffee, watched the steam rise, and whispered, "It's okay. One is enough." Then, on a February night with a soft rain, I stood before the bathroom mirror under the yellow light. The lines by my eyes and mouth, each one a record of a patient year, I touched my cheek and said aloud, as if making a promise to myself, "I will stand by me." That small sound warmed my chest, like someone had opened a door. I slept better that night than I had in years. No more dreaming of a ringing phone, no more waking to phantom chimes. Just rain pattering on the roof, and a peace I'd never known. The next morning, I got up early and mailed my resignation. I decided to sell the old house and move somewhere new, where the past couldn't cling. Inside the envelope, I tucked a small note to myself. "Don't be afraid of losing your children. Be afraid of losing yourself without noticing." From then on, I prepared for freedom. I took 3 months to gather funds, check documents, and sign. No one in the family knew. I no longer felt guilty about keeping a secret. I felt calm, because this time, the secret still belonged to me. Sometimes, Lauren called not to ask how I was, but to share about her husband's promotion or her child's high test score. I listened, nodded, and ended with, "That's wonderful. I'm happy for you." Tyler, whenever money ran short, texted, "Mom, help me one last time." I still replied, "I'm not able to anymore." No anger, no tears, just a deliberate quiet. When everything was ready, I packed. I took only a few books, some old photo frames, and a small notebook scrawled with, "Start again where there's the sound of waves." On the day I left, I didn't leave a message, just a small note on the door. "I'm going to look for what you forgot, peace." And so I left. No fanfare, no one seeing me off. Just me, a suitcase, and a dream that waited half a lifetime. I'd heard people say, everyone has a place meant for them, it's just that not everyone is brave enough to go find it. For me, that place appeared one March morning when I stumbled on a Zillow listing. 2-bedroom wooden house, windows facing the sea, wide porch, to catch the wind, price $299,000. Description: a house for a new beginning. I stopped for a long time. The first photo showed a silver-white house, paint peeling a bit, nestled among green palms, the horizon a deep blue in the distance. A large window faced the ocean, a long wooden porch, and an old rope-hung swing. Something in that image touched me, a peace that felt like I'd lived there in a dream. I called Denise Harper, the agent recommended by an old friend. Her voice was bright and sincere. "Hello, Miss Josephine. If you're truly seeking peace, I think I've found the very house." 2 days later, we met in Street Augustine, the oldest seaside city in America. The sky was glass blue, the wind carried salt and jasmine. Denise arrived with her blonde hair tied up, a white linen dress, and a small ring of keys. "Are you running away or running toward?" she teased, half serious. I looked out at the sea and smiled. Both. The house sat on a quiet little street paved with coral stone. The walkway was dusted with fine sand, flanked by pink bougainvillea. When Denise opened the door, the smell of salt and old wood rushed in, as if the house had its own soul. Light poured through the big window, scattering on floating dust like the sun lived with me. "This belonged to an elderly couple," Denise said, opening each window to let the wind in. "They moved to live with their daughter in Maine. Paperwork's clean, just need a roof and foundation check." I walked slowly through the living room, chestnut-colored walls, bright floors. From the kitchen corner, you could see the outline of the surf, the thing I'd dreamed of for years. Under the stairs, A little shelf still held one old novel, The Old Man and the Sea. I smiled. Maybe that was a good sign. Denise led me to the porch. I think you'll like this most. She pushed the door open, and there was a vast stretch of blue. The wind tossed my hair, the surf rolled, gulls cried far away. I closed my eyes, and for a moment it felt like I'd just found my real heartbeat. Miss Josephine? Denise said softly. I opened my eyes. I want to buy. Denise looked slightly surprised. No more time to think? I shook my head. I've been thinking my whole life. We sat at the porch table to go over the steps. Denise called in an appraiser to check the roof, foundation, electrical, and plumbing. Everything was solid, just needed a few paint touch-ups and a glass pane replaced. I made the deposit that day. When I wired $300,000, my hand trembled. It was the money I once meant to leave for later. To my kids, like so many American mothers who believe their children deserve an inheritance. But now I understood. If you don't live fully while you are alive, leaving any amount behind is pointless. I wanted my later to start right now. That evening, I went back to a small motel. Wind rattled the finest window. The sound of waves tapped a far-off rhythm. I looked at the transfer receipt stamped, completed, and exhaled. I texted Denise, "Thank you. I'm not buying a house today. I'm buying myself back." She replied with a single heart emoji. I didn't tell Lauren or Tyler. For the first time in 40 years of being a mother, I had a secret I didn't share. Not because I feared objections, but because I wanted to keep a piece of life that wouldn't be judged. Before finalizing the paperwork, I sent everything to Maya Chen, the young attorney who had helped me set up documents to protect seniors' rights. She reviewed the purchase contract, then nodded slightly. "This house is in your name. No one can touch it unless you sign. But I recommend creating a living trust to protect the asset if anything unexpected happens later," I agreed. Maya helped me open a separate account, clearly stating, "The ultimate beneficiary will be chosen by me when I want, not when someone forces it." She also advised me to invest in security. I bought a 4-camera system with 90-day cloud storage mounted at the front door, back door, porch, and kitchen. Not because I feared burglars, but because I feared the uninvited return of those who once treated me like a place to take from. I wrote down all necessary contacts on a list called Emergency Contacts 1. Denise Harper, Realtor and new friend. A2. Maya Chen, Attorney, legal contact. And 3. Dean Morales, Deputy County Sheriff, whom I know from volunteering at the Women's Association. 4. Dr. Mary Goldberg, family doctor who understands my health. I printed the list, laminated it, and stuck it behind the front door. Everything was organized and logical, as if I were rewriting my life from the beginning, but this time in my own handwriting. On key handover day, Denise drove over to pick me up. She put on some light jazz and said, "I love seeing people find their home." I smiled and answered, "And I love the feeling of not having to explain." When the car turned onto the sandy lane, I saw the house appearing between 2 rows of palms. Sunlight slanted through the leaves, scattering shimmering patches on the wooden walls like waves. The white door swung open. Wind rushed in, carrying the scent of the sea and of beginnings. I stepped inside, placed my hand on the wood, and felt warmth left by the sun. I spoke softly, almost a whisper. "From now on, I belong here." Denise laughed. "And this house has the owner it deserves." We opened the windows to let the breeze pass through every room, brushing away old dust. Denise helped me set the table again and hang a nameplate, "Josephine's house," by the door. She said, "Every house has its own soul. You just need to give it breath." In the afternoon after she left, I sat on the porch and watched the sunset slide down the water. I turned on the old radio. The previous owners left. Frank Sinatra drifted softly. The sea wind slipped through my hair, reminding me of evenings when I was young and believed peace existed only in songs. But now I knew. It was truly here, all around me. I brewed a cup of tea, set it on the railing, and gazed out. The sea poured gold, birds gliding by and leaving thin black strokes like memory. I said quietly to myself, "All right, Josephine. You finally came home." That first night, I put on fresh sheets, turned off the lights, and left the window cracked for the breeze. The waves were steady like a lullaby. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of a ringing phone. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the big window, lighting the dry salt streaks on the railing. I made coffee and sat on the porch steps, watching fishermen haul their nets in the distance. No traffic noise, no city sounds, only wind and sea and me. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, new chapter. Inside it, I wrote the first line. Today, I officially stepped into the rest of my life, not to wait for anyone, but to live. I saved it, closed the laptop, and looked at the ocean again. The water shone like a mirror, reflecting my face, aged, but no longer sorrowful. It was the face of someone newly free. After I moved into the wave-facing house, I thought I was safe enough. But soon I realized peace needs protection too, not with locks, but with clarity. Maya, the young attorney I trusted, called me on a Monday morning. Her voice was firm but warm. "Miss Josephine, now that you have your own home and independent assets, the next step is to make sure that if anything happens, every decision still belongs to you and no one can change it." I stayed quiet for a few seconds, listening to the surf outside the porch. Then I answered, "Go on, Maya." She sent me a list, a new will, medical and financial POAs, powers of attorney, a statement of assets, and even guidance on setting secure bank passwords. "You must designate who's allowed to act on your behalf if you can't sign," Maya said clearly. I knew she meant my children, Lauren and Tyler, those who once used taking care of mom as a banner to seize that power. I said softly, "I won't let anyone decide my life again." 3 days later, Maya came to the house. We sat on the porch while the afternoon light tilted through the palms. She opened her laptop and read each clause: healthcare proxy, Dr. Mary Goldberg, financial agent, Maya Chen, will beneficiary, not disclosed. I signed. The pen moved slow and sure, like carving a vow. From now on, no one could sign for me unless I allowed it. When Maya left, she squeezed my hand. "You did what many can't, setting boundaries with your own family. That's not selfish, it's self-preservation." I nodded, a small but honest smile. That evening, I began standardizing security at home. I ordered a video doorbell that connects to my phone with cloud storage. Dean, the deputy sheriff I know from volunteering with the Women's Association, helped me install it. He showed me how to enable motion sensors, change the Wi-Fi password, and create a separate guest password. "You'll be surprised," Dean smiled. "A lot of asset grab cases start because someone knew the victim's Wi-Fi password." I laughed, never imagining something so small mattered. But inside, I felt grateful to him, a man who speaks little and does much. Dean also suggested a wall safe. He said, "Don't keep everything at the bank. You need a secure spot inside your home." I did exactly that. The safe was mounted behind an old painting in my bedroom. I carefully placed inside my passport, savings book, home purchase documents, insurance policies, and a USB drive with screenshots of texts, call logs, and my bank statements. I photocopied everything in duplicate, one set to Maya, one set for Denise to keep at her real estate office. Denise didn't ask much. She simply rested a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "Stay cautious. Not because you're paranoid, but because they made you be." I went quiet. The truth in that line made my heart sting. A week later, I received a reminder letter for a routine checkup from Dr. Howard Feld, the geriatrician. I proactively added a request for a comprehensive cognitive evaluation. When I said that, "Doctor?" Feld looked at me curiously. I smiled. "Just to make sure I'm sharper than people think." He chuckled and agreed. The assessment lasted over 2 hours. He asked how many words I could recall after 3 minutes, had me redraw shapes, then posed hypothetical financial scenarios. When we finished, he nodded and signed the record. Good cognition, independent reasoning, no signs of decline. I looked at that paper and felt relief. It wasn't just a medical record, it was a legal shield if someone ever tried to claim I was incompetent. But there was something else I needed: inner quiet. I found Dr. Naomi Price, a therapist in town. Her office was small, with landscape paintings and a gentle mint scent. On the very first day, she asked, "What's hardest for you, Josephine?" I answered honestly, saying no to my children. We spoke over many sessions. Dr. Price helped me see that kindness doesn't mean accepting harm. She taught me simple phrases I'd never dared to say. "No, I can't lend you money anymore. No, I don't agree to let you decide for me. No, I need rest. I don't need to keep proving my love." The first time I practiced those words, my throat tightened. But gradually, they grew lighter. "Dr. Price said, you're relearning the language of self-respect. It isn't loud, but it carries weight." At the same time, I began archiving every piece of evidence. I made a folder on my computer called "If There's a Case." Inside were screenshots of messages, bank histories, repair invoices, ownership certificates, and weekly backed-up security camera clips. I noted dates, times, and people involved. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I refused to let truth be taken again. I also started a Coast journal. Each morning before coffee, I wrote down one thing I was grateful for. Day 1, I'm grateful I can still hear the waves. Day 10, I'm grateful I've learned to sleep without waiting for the phone. Day 30, I'm grateful I've stopped being afraid. The journal slowly thickened, handwriting slanted, ink in blue and brown, each line a brick I used to build my peace. I also formed a morning walk habit. At 5:30, before sunrise, the wind tasted salty, and the sand was still cold. I walked the shoreline, counting waves instead of promises. They say the waves are never the same, yet they always return just like me. Even pushed far, I still found my way back to myself. Sometimes I met neighbors exercising, Mr. Martin walking his dog, Miss Ruth picking shells. We greeted one another, then quietly watched the sea. Few words were needed, just the sense that each of us was seeking our own peace. After a few weeks, I noticed my phone rang less. Lauren stopped calling often. Tyler sent one text asking if, "You still have your savings?" I replied, "I'm fine, don't worry." That was it. No more, no explanations. I wasn't a 24/7 switchboard for my kids anymore. Instead, I started caring for myself in the simplest ways. Every morning, I swam not in a warm pool, but in the real ocean, where the cold water numbed my skin. At first, I only waded near shore, water to my knees. Then, day by day, I went farther. The cold sliced like a blade, yet each swim felt like my brain rinsed away old memories. I called it my neural rebirth therapy. "Dr. Price said, you've found your own way back to life." In the evenings, I wrote my monthly plan, renew home insurance, update account passwords, Send thank you. Notes to Denise and Dean. Water plants. Replace porch bulbs. Each bullet was small, but for me it was how I maintained sovereignty over my life. No one did those things for me anymore, and no one was allowed to take away that sense of control. One late night, while I was folding a blanket, the phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up and heard a man. Mrs. Josephine Myers? I'm with the insurance company. We need to verify ownership of the house in street. Augustine. I paused for a few seconds, then smiled. I'm the homeowner. I have all documents. Tell me what you need, and I'll send it immediately through my attorney. The line went silent for a few beats, then disconnected. Do you have a mother or father living alone? After the line, I'll send it through my attorney. What else do you think they should prepare? Share what you've experienced in the comments. Your story might help protect someone else's peace. I sat on the sofa and felt my heart beat slow and steady. No more shaking. No more fear. I realized, when you prepare thoroughly, others run out of chances. That night, I went out to the porch and watched the moon rise over the ocean. Silver light stretched like a giant mirror. I poured a small glass of wine, raised it, and whispered, to a new Josephine who knows how to say no, how to keep quiet, and how to believe she deserves peace. The wind moved through the porch carrying salt and warm wood. In the dark, I felt safer than ever. 3 quiet weeks passed, as if the sea conspired with me, keeping all secrets in its waves. Every morning I still walked the sand with a small notebook to write that day's gratitude. My life was simple, almost meditative. Morning coffee, a few lines in my journal, sunlight through the window, the mingled scents of salt and wood. I began to believe that Lauren and Tyler had stopped caring, or at least stopped trying to interfere. But on a Friday afternoon, the phone rang. Lauren's name appeared on the screen. My heart slowed a beat. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Her voice floated in smooth as honey, sweet to the point of counterfeit. Mom, where are you? I miss you so much. Those 3 words, miss you so much, fell light as feathers, but I heard the metal hidden inside. I leaned back and kept my tone even. You miss me? It's been 3 weeks without a single text, and today you suddenly miss me? Lauren gave a strained laugh. I know. I was wrong. But I've been so busy, Mom. Where are you living? I'll drive over. I just want to see you. I was silent a few seconds, then asked, Who gave you my address? There was a pause. Very short, but enough for me to understand. Well, a neighbor said. They saw you move. I just want to make sure you're okay. I pressed my lips together. A clumsy answer, and I marked it red in my mind. No one in the old neighborhood had this address. I'd carefully erased every trace, which meant someone had been digging. I said quietly, I'm fine, Lauren, thank you. But today I'm busy another time. That's okay, Mom, she said, too fast and too bright. I'm already on my way. You'll be happy to see us. I looked at the phone after she hung up, the black screen reflecting my face calm but taut as a wire. The sea wind kicked up, carrying the damp smell of rain. I opened the security camera app and checked every angle. Green indicators glowed steady. The images were clear. Front gate, porch, living room, kitchen. The mics were live, everything under control. I texted Maya quickly. My daughter called. She has the address. Bad feeling. In under a minute, a new message popped up. Don't let them in. Dean and I are on our way. I breathed deep. Each breath tasted of salt, fear, and resolve mixed together. About 40 minutes later, an engine sounded on the road. I stepped onto the porch. A shiny black SUV stopped at the gate the kind people rent when they've got big business to do. The door opened. Tyler got out first, shirt buttoned to the top, eyes sweeping the yard, appraising every square foot. Lauren followed with a large handbag, heels sinking slightly into the sand. Finally, a stranger appeared. Gray suit, crisp tie, glossy black briefcase. I stood still on the porch, hands loosely clasped. Lauren smiled, a cut-and-paste smile from a Happy Family commercial. "Mom, oh my God, you really live here? It's beautiful, the ocean right behind the house." Tyler didn't smile. He just scanned around, eyes passing over the porch and windows before landing on the wooden sign by the door, Josephine's house. He muttered, almost under his breath, "It's definitely worth it." Neither of them hugged me, no touch, no, "How are you, Mom?" Only eyes measuring in dollar signs. The man stepped onto the porch and held out his hand. "Hello, Mrs. Myers. I'm Victor Hale, your children's attorney." I shook it with just enough pressure. "Attorney?" Lauren cut in, sugar sweet. "Don't misunderstand, Mom. He's here to help organize your paperwork so you can feel secure. You know you forget things, we worry." A shiver ran through me. The way she said, "You forget things," light, natural, as if rehearsed. Victor opened his case and took out a stack of papers. Crisp white sheets, neatly aligned, clipped with a silver binder. "This is a proposal to set up a trust managed by your children. It ensures your assets are protected and no one can take advantage of you. All spending would be co-supervised by them, so you can live here worry-free." I looked him in the eye and asked slowly, "And if I don't agree?" He gave a thin smile in true lawyer fashion. "Oh, that's fine. We're just presenting it. The decision is entirely yours." I glanced at Lauren and Tyler. Lauren avoided my eyes. Tyler stared straight back, cold as stone. I asked, "Where were you when I needed you? When I was sick? When I was abandoned? When I sold my wedding ring to pay Lauren's tuition? When I mortgaged the house to help Tyler open a garage?" No one answered. Only silence and waves hitting the pilings as if underlining every word. I walked slowly to the porch table and pointed at the chairs. "Sit, but I won't be serving tea." Lauren frowned slightly. "Mom, we're just trying to help." I smiled, calm to the point of frightening. "Really? Then sit and help me look at the ceiling." All three followed my gaze. On the ceiling, the security camera glowed green and the mic blinked. Victor blinked and took a half step back. Lauren started to speak, but I cut in. "Yes, that camera records video and audio. Everything you say today will be stored for 90 days in the cloud, auto-backed up every 24 hours. I saw Lauren's hand tremble, and Tyler turn away, hiding his unease under a mocking look. "Camera? You don't trust us, Mom?" I answered softly. "No. I've just learned to trust evidence more than words." The air thickened. Victor cleared his throat and tried to recover his professional tone. "Mrs. Myers, nothing serious. We just want you to feel at ease." I looked at him with a smile as cool as glass. How strange, no one has ever made me more uneasy than someone trying to help me feel at ease. At that moment, a car horn sounded on the road. I recognized the engine. Dean Morales's pickup turned onto the sandy lane. Headlights swept across the porch. At the same time, Maya stepped out of the passenger seat in a long coat, carrying a document case. Lauren jumped to her feet, surprise flashing in her eyes. "Mom, you called a lawyer?" I stayed seated and said, "No, she came because I have an appointment." Dean stepped onto the porch, voice steady. "Is there a problem here, Mrs. Myers?" Victor tried for polite. "Just a civil discussion, officer." Maya opened her case and pulled out a packet. What a coincidence! I brought copies of Mrs. Myers's new will and POAs, notarized and filed with the county court. Just to avoid misunderstandings. I watched both my children's faces change. Tyler frowned and clenched his fist. Lauren tried to smile, but her voice shook. "Why would you do this, Mom?" "We're only afraid someone will trick you." Maya answered for me. "It's wonderful you're concerned, but your mother hasn't been tricked. She's simply done allowing anyone to exploit her." Dean walked a slow circle, casually eyeing the SUV. The license plate caught the afternoon light, another county. He spoke slowly. "If the three of you have no specific purpose beyond a wellness visit, I suggest you leave before dark. The coastal road isn't easy to drive at night." The words were gentle, but it was an order that didn't need repeating. Victor nodded, trying to stay polite. "We'll come back later, when Mrs. Myers is ready to talk." "Oh, I'm ready," I said. "I just don't say what you want to hear anymore." They went quiet and gathered their papers. Lauren put a hand to her chest, her voice breaking. "Mom, you've changed so much." I looked her in the eyes. "No. I've just gone back to being myself." As the SUV rolled out the gate, I watched without feeling hurt. Only a light emptiness remained, like after you clear out an old room and realize the wind can finally come in. Maya sat beside me and poured some water. Dean leaned against the porch rail, eyes still on the sea. "You did very well," Maya said softly. I shook my head. "No, they'll be back. My kids don't give up that easily." Maya looked at me, serious. "Then next time, we'll have more evidence." "You're not alone." I looked up at the ceiling. The camera light stayed green, loyal and silent. Outside, the waves hit the shore, steady as the ocean's warning. "The storm isn't over, Josephine. Be ready." And I knew exactly right. The real battle had only just begun. I used to think nothing hurts more than betrayal. But today I understand. Worse than betrayal is when the betrayer still calls you Mom. The next afternoon, just as I expected, the black SUV reappeared. This time there were no smiles, no sugar-coated voices, only the impatience of people trying to close a deal. I opened the door without inviting them in, but they stepped onto the porch as if the place were theirs. Lauren held the same stack of papers, voice trying to stay soft. "Mom, I just want to be clear. This isn't coercion. It's simply a way to make sure you're properly cared for." I leaned on the doorframe. Light off the water lit her hair, but her face darkened with tension. Behind her, Victor Hale, the family attorney they'd hired, had already opened his briefcase, pulled out a new contract, and set it on the porch table like a finely woven net. "I," called Maya. She arrived soon after with her laptop and a look I trusted more than any document. "Let me read first," she said. Victor smiled, smooth as silk. "Go ahead, we're not hiding anything." Maya read quickly. The deeper she got, the more her brow furrowed. I heard her repeat each clause, as if to make sure I needed no further explanation. If the beneficiary, namely Mrs. Josephine Myers, loses decision-making capacity, authority over assets transfers to co-guardians Lauren and Tyler Myers. Expenses for long-term medical care may include selling the primary residence to cover costs, and all actions are deemed lawful so long as they are in the best interest of the ward. The wording was cold as steel, wrapped in pristine paper. Maya looked up, straight at Victor. "So if she signs, you can sell this house without her consent simply by labeling it medical expenses. Am I correct?" Victor gave a thin smile. "Of course, but that would only happen if she's no longer competent." Lauren cut in, sharp. "We're just being cautious. This is our inheritance. Mom, you don't need to worry about it." I looked at my daughter. For a second I saw the little girl who once ran through the house to show me her first drawing. Now the woman in front of me talked about inheritance while her mother was still alive. I answered slowly, one word at a time. "Money that belongs to me while I'm alive is not inheritance. It's work, blood, and time. And it's still flowing in me." The porch went silent. Only the waves hit the pilings, steady, strong, and sure. Victor slipped back into his smooth negotiator's tone. "Mrs. Myers, We're not trying to make things hard. Sign. And in return, your children promise to call every week and visit often. It's a win-win. I laughed once hoarse and short like ice clinking in a glass. You're bribing me with affection? Trading a few phone calls for my right to be a person? Victor hesitated, and Lauren lowered her head to avoid my eyes. Dean, still by the window, tracking every move, spoke in a calm, firm voice. Mrs. Josephine Myers is the lawful owner of this home. I've checked the county land records. Any attempt to coerce, threaten, or trick her into signing falls under elder protection violations. And I should note, this entire conversation is being recorded on camera. Victor's expression shifted, then he forced himself to stay composed. No one's coercing anyone, we're just concerned. Tyler shot to his feet, growling. Mom's not in her right mind if she thinks this is okay. Who hides money in a house from her own kids? We just want to manage it so she doesn't have to worry. I looked at my son, eyes bloodshot, not from love but from anger. I pulled the cognitive assessment from Dr. Feld out of my bag and held it out to him. Here. Dr. Howard Feld, geriatric specialist, signed. Results. Good cognition, independent reasoning, no signs of decline. If you still doubt me, I'll test again, but this time you come with me, so we can see who's more blind. Tyler crushed the paper in his fist, face reddening. Lauren tugged his sleeve, whispering, Stop! He yanked away and slammed the paper onto the table. Fine, play it your way. But don't think we'll stand by forever. I looked at Victor, who quietly tucked the contract back into his case, eyes cold and calculating. He knew he couldn't win today, but that look, part arrogance, part warning, said this fight wasn't over. Before leaving, Lauren turned back. Do you really want to cut us off, Mom? I answered softly, without a trace of anger. No, I just want to cut off anyone who treats me like a walking wallet. Lauren bit her lip and turned away. The black SUV backed out, tires grinding through the sand, leaving deep, crooked ruts like torn promises. When they were finally gone, I stood on the porch and listened to wind whistle through the cracks. The sky shifted to dusk, half light, half dark, the same conflicted color as the kinship laid bare before me. Maya packed the documents, sliding their contract into an evidence envelope. Do you want me to file this with the court now? She asked. I shook my head. Not yet. They'll be back, and next time we need them to reveal everything themselves. Maya nodded, understanding. Dean stepped closer, voice low. You did well, but I'm afraid next time they won't come with just paperwork. I looked at him and smiled wryly. Then I won't have just paperwork either. He smiled, tilting his head. You really are a woman of strategy. After they left, I locked the door and drew the curtains. The house went quiet, only wind thudding against the window frame. I poured a glass of water and sat, hands wrapped around it for warmth. I looked around the wall clock, the little cactus, the lamp glow on a black and white photo of me when I was young. Everything was calm, only my heart still trembled, not from fear, but from the sorrow of seeing the truth stripped bare. Conditional family, I murmured, the words falling into the air like a cruel definition. I once believed love was unconditional, but today I saw clearly. For many, family lasts only until they get their signature on your assets. I set the glass down. My hands still shook a little. Not from weakness, but the last tremor of someone slipping free of fear. I opened my laptop and backed up the footage into the folder. If there's a case. New file name. Trust. Fraud. Recording. 1. MP. 4. I attached a note with the date, time, and attendees. A small but sturdy system like a fence I built around my heart. Outside, the wind rose. Waves pounded the shore, white and relentless. I looked out the window and said quietly, "Peace isn't the absence of storms, it's learning to stand steady in them." I smiled, then lifted the stated, "Water replacing tremor, replacing prayer. Thank you for letting me not sign today." A month after the day I refused to sign, I thought things had settled. But peace, so I learned, is never a free gift. It's envied, especially by those who share your blood. That morning, while I was watering the porch flowers, the mailman stopped. He joked with a smile, "Looks like you're famous, Mrs. Myers, court mail addressed just to you." I couldn't smile back. A chill ran down my spine when I saw the thick envelope stamped by the street. Johns County Court. I carried it inside, sat at the table, letter opener shaking in my hand, white paper, black print. Neat, cold, petition to declare incapacity and appoint legal guardians, Lauren Myers and Tyler Myers. I read it twice. Every word thudded against my heart. My children didn't just want the assets. They wanted to strip me of personhood. I picked up the phone and called Maya. Her voice came quick and firm. "Don't panic, Miss Josephine. We won't play defense, we'll counterattack." That afternoon, Maya came over. She didn't wear her usual black suit, just a white blouse and hair in a neat bun. On the table, a new stack of files. Copy of the petition. Notice of hearing. Hearing date, the 12th of next month. She set a hand on the file, calm voice, eyes bright as flame. "We won't wait to be interrogated. We'll prove you're fully competent and that the ones claiming to care for Mom are angling for her property." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "Where do we start, Maya?" She pulled a notebook and read quickly. "We need witnesses, medical records, and social proof. I'll make a list." Then she wrote, clear line by clear line. 1. Denise Harper, the realtor, confirming the home purchase was entirely lawful and you decided every detail yourself. 2. Deputy Sheriff Dean Morales, witness to pressure and threats from the children. 3. Dr. Howard Feld, cognitive assessment proving no decline. 4. Dr. Naomi Price, therapy report confirming full emotional stability. The home purchase was a proactive, healthy decision. 5. Former neighbors, to testify that the children neglected their mother for years. I looked at the list and felt a little lighter. It wasn't a one-woman fight anymore. 3 days later, I met Dr. Feld again. He greeted me with a kind smile. Maya told me about the suit. "Don't worry, we'll do this by the book." This time he ordered the full battery: short-term memory, verbal response, reasoning, reaction time, spatial awareness. 2 hours of focused work. When we finished, he peered over his glasses. "Miss Josephine, I see many people your age, but few keep this level of sharpness." "I'll sign the statement. No signs of cognitive decline." I thanked him and shook his hand, as if reclaiming a piece of dignity. It wasn't just a medical form, it was an ID card for my self-trust. The next day, I saw Dr. Naomi Price. Same office, mint scent, a seascape across from the chairs. I told her about the petition. She shook her head. "There's a name for what you're going through. Gaslighting of the elderly. When family tries to make a senior doubt her own memory." I gave a dry chuckle. "My grandchild would call that modern family care." She laughed, then turned serious. "I'll write the report. You're fully stable, fully capable, and your actions buying a home, planning, installing security are proactive decisions, not outside influence." I nodded, knowing that report would be the softest, sharpest weapon. That night at home, I stood before the mirror. A 67-year-old woman stared back, no makeup, but steady eyes. Maya had advised, "You need to rehearse answers to their lawyers' questions. No emotion, no arguing. Each answer one breath long, cut out words they can twist. I practiced, Mrs. Myers, do you remember how much you transferred? To your son? I remember each amount, and I have the statements. Did you ever forget to pay a bill? No. All payments are automatic. I set them up. Do you ever feel disoriented or lose track of time? No. I keep a daily journal with exact dates, over and over, until my voice stopped shaking like relearning the native language of reason. In the last week before the hearing, Maya taught me body language. Shoulders back, eyes steady. When attacked, don't respond immediately. Pause 2 seconds, breathe, then answer. If they start yelling, turn to the court and say, I'll wait until they're calm. She also taught me to rest my hands lightly on the table instead of clenching, to show control. People won't just hear what you say. They'll watch how you exist. I smiled. You're training me like an actor, Maya replied. No, I'm teaching you to keep control in the very room where they want to take it away. In the final evenings, I compiled evidence. I printed a 2-year timeline. Calls and texts from them. Only 7. Calls, texts, and transfers from me. Over 200. I clipped them into a blue binder labeled Evidence of Neglect and Financial Abuse. Looking at those numbers, I saw one truth. Real love never needs proof. Exploitation always leaves a trail. The night before the hearing, I didn't sleep right away. I sat on the porch and watched the sea. The water wasn't calm, windy, whitecaps everywhere. I said to myself, tomorrow I won't be a victim. I may be the respondent, but I'm not weak. I'm standing up for my right to decide. I listened to the waves like my own heartbeat. Each surge and fall patient, persistent. I closed my eyes and breathed until fear dissolved like salt in water. Next morning, I woke early. Dawn was still gray. I chose a light gray blouse, soft slacks, flat shoes the color of sand. No jewelry, no necklace, no expensive watch, just a small clip to hold my hair. I wanted to enter the courthouse as myself, unarmored, but unbowed. Before leaving, I paused to look around walls, windows, stripes of light through the curtains. I whispered, "Don't worry, little house. I'll protect you and myself." Then I shut the door. The lock clicked small sound, but it rang like an oath. Dean waited by the car. Maya sat up front with the case on her lap, eyes intent. "Ready?" she asked. I smiled and fastened my seatbelt. Yes. Time to learn the art of being a defendant without lowering my head. The car rolled slowly along the coastal road. The sun edged up behind the palms, light flaring in the rearview mirror. I saw my face there, old but bright, tired but proud. Waves thumped in the distance, singing a quiet encouragement. "Go, Josephine. This time, don't be afraid. You're headed toward your own justice." The street? Johns County courtroom wasn't large, but the air was cold enough that I clasped my hands for warmth. Cream-colored walls, dark benches, and light pouring from high windows made the room solemn and heavy, as if every breath could be recorded. I sat at the defense table beside Maya. She opened the file and nodded to steady me. "Stay calm. Today belongs to the truth," I answered with a small smile, though my heart pounded like surf before a storm. Across the aisle, Lauren and Tyler sat at the plaintiff's table in dark clothes. In front of them sat Victor Hale, the family attorney, with the calm face of a man too used to putting lipstick on lies. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The hearing began. Victor opened, voice precise and sharp like a freshly honed blade. "Your Honor, my client's 2 devoted children only want to protect their mother. But Mrs. Josephine Myers has acted impulsively, irrationally, and shows severe self-isolation. She liquidated old assets, cut off contact with her children, and handed financial authority to an outsider, a young lawyer she barely knows. We believe she can no longer make reasonable decisions. Each word, impulsive, irrational, unreasonable, was a pebble thrown at my face. I looked down. My hands lay calm on my lap, knuckles white. Victor went on. Evidence shows that over the past year, she refused to see her children, kept no contact, and displayed troubling behavior installing cameras throughout the home, hiring a personal legal advisor, and recording family members. In our view, these actions stem from a victimization delusion, not sound judgment. Maya didn't interrupt. She waited. And when he finished, she stood, her voice light but clear. "Your Honor, we request to play the video evidence." The judge nodded. Maya signaled the technician. The large screen lit up with the first clip. It was Mother's Day last year. Me in my old kitchen setting 2 bowls of soup, a small mousse cake, and a card still unsigned. Maya spoke evenly. "Your Honor, this was Mother's Day. Mrs. Josephine prepared lunch for her children. The table is empty." And on social media, her daughter posted a photo with the caption, "She zoomed in, with the people who matter most." Silence fell over the room. Lauren lowered her head, face still trying to stay cold. Maya said quietly, "A mother, self-isolating, or abandoned?" She clicked to the next slide. The screen showed 1 year of call and text logs, 4 calls from Lauren, 3 from Tyler, hundreds of unanswered calls and texts from me. "These are their contact frequencies," Maya said evenly. "Who cut off whom?" Victor leaned forward to object. "The court can't judge capacity on personal feelings." "Exactly," Maya replied, eyes flashing. "So we'll let the facts speak." She played the next video. "The confrontation at my house the day Victor, Lauren, and Tyler came demanding I sign the trust." In the clip, Victor's voice rang, "Out, sign it, and in return, your kids promise to call every week." And Lauren's voice wavered, "That's our inheritance money." The courtroom seemed to freeze. I heard my heartbeat pounding in my chest, then looked at Maya. She gave a small nod. She turned to me and signaled. I stood and walked slowly to the witness stand. The light from above was cold and white. My voice was low but steady. "I didn't buy this house to run away. I bought it so I wouldn't be invisible anymore. All my life, I gave to them time, money, love. And when I had nothing left to give, I became a burden. I bought that house to live again, as a person with the right to exist." I paused and looked straight at my 2 children. Both Lauren and Tyler avoided my eyes. Maya called Dr. Howard Feld to the stand. He's nearly 10 years older than me, with the gravelly voice of someone who speaks slowly but surely. I evaluated Mrs. Myers twice within 3 months. Both times showed completely normal cognition, logical thinking, good reaction time, and solid problem solving. There is no medical evidence whatsoever that she lacks capacity. Victor tried to press him, but could she have a mild psychological issue, like anxiety or a delusional belief? "Doctor?" Feld answered immediately. "No. I conducted the evaluation myself. She's clearer than most of her relatives." A soft ripple of laughter went through the room. The judge tapped the gavel. "Order." Next was Dr. Naomi Price. She entered with a gentle presence, but her voice could quiet the entire room. Mrs. Josephine Myers came to me to learn how to say no to unreasonable demands. No one is mentally ill just because they want to protect themselves. On the contrary, that's a sign of emotional recovery. Maya smiled, then motioned for the next witness, Denise Harper, the real estate agent. In a light blue suit with her hair pulled back, she spoke clearly. "I handled Mrs. Myers's home purchase. She reviewed every detail: foundation, electrical, property taxes, insurance, maintenance fees. There was no sign of confusion or impulsivity. Every decision was carefully considered, and she signed only after reading each clause. Finally, Deputy Sheriff Dean Morales took the stand. In uniform, he moved slowly but with authority. During my role as witness and security support, I found no sign of fraud. What I did observe was psychological pressure from the two adult children, including threats, insults, and attempts to force a signature. Victor sat silent, gripping his pen. Lauren exhaled hard, and Tyler kept his head down, avoiding the judge's eyes. Maya rose, closed the file, and her voice rolled out steady, each word as clear as waves breaking on rock. Your Honor, this is not the story of a frail, confused mother. This is the story of an older woman reclaiming her autonomy, and of children trying to use the law to launder their greed. I don't need many words, only to invite the court to look at the screen and ask, who actually needs protection? The courtroom went silent. The judge leaned back, his eyes deep and calm. He tapped the gavel lightly, then said, after reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court concludes, there is no basis to declare Mrs. Josephine Myers incapacitated. On the contrary, the plaintiff's conduct shows signs of attempting to exploit an elderly person's property. The petition is denied. The plaintiffs will pay all court costs and are warned that continued harassment may result in criminal charges. The room erupted into a hush. Lauren's breathing turned shallow, Tyler slammed his hand on the table, and Victor bowed his head while hurriedly packing his files. Maya touched my shoulder and whispered, "It's done." I stood, bowed to the judge, and turned to leave. My steps were slow but steady. Sunlight flooded the hallway, washing over my hands still trembling, but now from relief. In my mind's eye, I could still see the Mother's Day table, the empty table. But now I knew. Even if no one sits with me, I can still eat in peace. When I stepped out of the courthouse, I lifted my head. Sunlight spilled across my hair and laid a warm weight on my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt a lifetime's heaviness slide off. Not because I'd won the case, but because I was no longer treated as someone who had to prove she was sane enough to live. Wind blew in from the sea, carrying salt and sap, the scent I call the true smell of freedom. Maya came to me and held me tight. Her voice was small but firm. "Miss Josephine, you chose yourself, and the law stood by you." I didn't answer right away. I just squeezed her hand. Some victories don't need cheering, only a deep breath that tells you no one can shove you out of your own life anymore. Dean waited by the gate with a gentle smile. "Told you. You're too strong for the waves to swallow. Just keep going." I thanked him, then turned toward the sea where sunlight melted into water, glittering like 1,000 tiny hands patting the earth in applause. That evening, I sat on the porch. The sea breeze was salty, threading through my hair, my collar, and my spirit. Moonlight blinked across the water like shards of broken mirrors, quietly beautiful. I put the case file in a drawer and took out a blank sheet of paper. I wrote the first line, "To myself, the one who stood up when others wanted to kneel." I didn't write much. Just a few simple sentences. "Thank you for believing in yourself, even when people called you crazy. Thank you for saying no, even while your heart still wanted to be loved. Thank you for choosing to live, not just exist." I folded the letter and tucked it into the coastal journal. It wasn't a thank you to life, it was gratitude to the strong part of me. The part I once buried under useless apologies. 3 days after the ruling, Lauren texted, "Just a few lines. Mom, can we talk? We only want to settle. If you return the house and withdraw the filings, everything will be fine." I read it without anger, only tired. I closed the phone, set it on the table, and stepped onto the porch. The waves kept coming, the sky stayed blue, and I understood. My silence today was the clearest answer. Not because I hate them, but because I've stopped hoping to be loved on their terms. That night, Tyler called. His voice was sharp, rapid. "You think it's over because you won? I'll tell the papers you're senile, so everyone sees how crazy you really are." I listened to all of it without cutting in. Then I answered calmly, "Thank you for calling, and everything you just said is being saved on my server." I heard a hard inhale on the other end, then the line went dead. I set the phone down, no longer shaking like before. Maya once told me, "When people use threats, it means they've lost real power. Your job is not to hand it back." I smiled. "Exactly. I don't need to win by fear. I only need not to bow." The next morning, I took out a few seed packets Denise had sent, coastal wildflowers that need only sun and wind. I rolled up my sleeves and let my hands sink into the damp sand. The earth was cool, comforting. I planted small clusters along the porch, right by the wooden rail. When the wind blew, grains of sand dusted my cheek, and I didn't brush them away. They reminded me I can still feel the world with skin and breath. That afternoon, I stopped by the fishing village for coffee. The owner grinned. "Want the fisherman's style? Salt coffee, bitter, salty, sweet on the finish." I nodded. The first sip made me wince, but then the salt opened into gentle sweetness. I laughed and said, "Just like life. The salt makes you remember the sweet." He nodded. "That's why coastal folk don't fear bitterness. In the end, every salt water finds its way back to the sea." That night, I slept straight through without dreaming of the empty table. No scraping chairs, no waiting for a doorbell that never rings. Only waves steady and kind as a heartbeat. For the first time in years, I didn't dream of anyone coming back. I saw myself on the sand, arms open to the wind. Freedom, it turns out, looks like the wind unseen, but real wherever it touches. One morning, walking the beach, I met Ruth Ellison, the silver-haired woman I'd noticed a few times. She smiled and asked, "Are you Josephine Myers? I read about your case. I felt like I was reading about myself." I was a little surprised. "The article said your children sued you too, right?" she asked. I nodded. She sighed softly. "Me too. But I never dared go to court. I stayed quiet and lost my house." I took her hand. "I'm so sorry, Ruth. But you know, silence doesn't keep anyone. It only keeps the pain." She gave a sad smile, pale blue eyes on the horizon. "I learned that from you. When I read the ruling, I sat up and cried. I wished I'd had your courage." I squeezed her hand gently. "It's never too late to choose yourself." From then on, we started morning coffees. 2 women, 2 wooden chairs, 1 pot of salt coffee. We sat on my porch, listening to the waves, saying things we'd never dared say. Ruth told me about her old marriage, about a son who left at 20. I told her about the years I thought giving more would make them love me back. We didn't complain, didn't cry. We just talked and sometimes sat quietly together. Once, when I said I still write one thing I'm grateful for each day, Ruth smiled. "I write one thing I no longer need." Yesterday I wrote, "I don't need to prove I'm a good mother." I laughed. "Good one. Then today I'll write, I don't need to apologize for protecting myself." One breezy morning, Ruth said something I'll never forget. The wind was strong, the waves loud, but her voice was clear and warm like a prayer. "Peace is an asset, Josephine. And the biggest mistake we women make is signing it over to other people." I sat still. Those words fell into my heart like sand, light, but settling deep. I looked out at the sea where the sun was rising, gilding the waves. Yes, peace is not a prize. It's property. And from now on, I'll hold the title in my own hand, no consigning it, no granting it to anyone, Myers or otherwise. I breathed in. The wind filled my lungs salty and clean. Ruth smiled, lifted her salt, coffee, and clinked cups with me. Congratulations, Josephine. We're still alive, and this time, we're living for ourselves. I answered with a trembling but warm voice. Yes. This time I'm not just living, I'm truly free. One early summer morning, just as I set the coffee pot on the porch table, a small envelope slid through the mail slot. No return address, only a scrawl on the front. To Grandma. I knew the better. Handwriting, it was Emma's. My 10-year-old granddaughter. Lauren's child. I sat down, hands shaking a little as I opened it. Inside was a purple sheet, the corner creased twice. Grandma, I miss you. Mom says you're busy, but I saw you in the news. I don't understand everything, I just know you're not bad. When I grow up, I want to be like you, able to say no and still be kind. I love you lots. P.S. Do you still have a cat? I read it over and over, each line like a needle touching the softest part of my heart. It had been so long since I cried this time because I saw myself through a child's eyes. I picked up a pen and wrote back right away. Dear Emma, I miss you too. The sea here is beautiful. Every morning the waves run up to say hello. The waves come and go. But the tide always returns like true love, which finds its way back no matter how far it travels. I want to teach you 3 things about self-respect. 1. Never stay silent when your heart says no. 2. Don't believe anyone who calls you selfish for protecting yourself. 3. When others turn away, stand tall. Your straight back helps your head stay high. I don't have a cat yet, but lots of birds sing on my porch every morning. If you visit, I'll tell you all their names. Love, Grandma. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and mailed it with careful handwriting. For the first time in months, my heart felt calm as the morning sea, no undertow, just light spread across the water. That evening, Ruth, Denise, and I hosted our first Thursday night book circle. We sat around a small round porch table, each with a dog-eared book and a hot cup of tea. Denise chose The Old Man and the Sea, Ruth brought The Color Purple, and I read a short passage from Maya Angelou's journal. When I read, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it, Ruth pressed a hand to her heart. That was written for us. Denise smiled. I think it was written for every generation of women who once let others speak for them. We sat quietly, listening to the waves and the night insects riding the breeze. A little later, Maya the young lawyer stopped by with strawberry tarts. She said, half joking, I'm here to make sure you 3 don't start an anti-lawyer league. We laughed out loud. That sound, I realized, was something I hadn't heard in my own home for a long time. From then on, Thursday book nights became a small ritual. We didn't just read, we told our stories. Each of us was an open book, and the only wall left between us was trust. The next morning, I joined the ocean swimming group for seniors. They call themselves the Morning Tide Swimmers. The first lesson wasn't technique, it was breathing longer instead of worrying. The coach, a 75-year-old woman named Nora, said, People don't drown because of the waves. They drown because they forget to breathe. I took it to heart. Each time the cold water wrapped around me, I inhaled deep, closed my eyes, and felt my body fall into rhythm with the sea. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the deep. I understood that the more you fight, the more you sink, and the more you accept, the more you float. One afternoon, Dean stopped by. He carried a form and a small packet. I signed you up for the county's Personal Safety for Seniors program. They'll install an emergency app and give you a portable alarm. I teased, smiling. So you really see me as a senior now? Dean grinned gently. No, I see you as someone smart enough to plan ahead. He set up the app, showed me how to toggle it, and how to send my location if needed. Before leaving, he said, Peace doesn't always come on its own. You have to fence it in. I nodded. I'd learned that, and this time the fence was made of awareness, not fear. The next day, I made clam chowder and brought it to the neighbors, the Carters, the retired couple who helped me move in. Mrs. Carter was surprised. You still remember the Northeastern recipe? Goodness, it smells amazing. We ate together and talked about gardens, rain, and the old days. Before I left, she held my hand. We need you here, truly. Not many like you in this town. I stopped short. We need you. The words stung my eyes. For years I'd only heard, we need you for one more thing, and behind that always came money, labor, or sacrifice. Now, for the first time, someone needed me for me. That night I wrote another letter, this one for forgiveness. I wrote to Lauren, to Tyler, and even to Victor. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation. It only means I'm no longer carrying you on my back. I didn't send it. I folded it and placed it in the Coastal Journal. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't need a recipient. It just needs the writer willing to let go. The following week, I started a new project, a blog called Coastal Diary at 67. I wrote under my real name. The first post was titled, Don't Let Anyone Write Your Ending. I told my story, from a mother stripped of control to a woman relearning how to own her breath. No frills, no philosophy, just truth. I didn't expect it to travel so far. Hundreds of comments, most from older folks. I'm 72, and I just said no to my son for the first time. You made me want to go visit my mother. Thank you for saying what so many of us feel. One morning, someone knocked. A middle-aged woman stood there with a bouquet of lavender. I'm Emily from the next town, she said, voice tight. After reading your blog, I went to see my mother, whom I hadn't visited in 2 years. We hugged this morning. Thank you because you reminded me time isn't endless. After she left, I sat down and cried, but not from sorrow. It was the first time I cried because I felt useful. That afternoon, I cleaned a closet and found a spare set of keys, house, safe, back gate. I turned them in my hand, then put them in a small glass jar and labeled it, Open only when you remember yourself. Not when I forget, but when I remember. Remember how long it took to earn this freedom. I set the jar on a shelf beside an old photo of me and Emma on the beach. 2 faces, one big and one small, both turned to the sea where the waves keep rising, reminding me, anyone can begin again. At any age, no matter the losses. I whispered, a promise to myself. If anyone comes looking for me, they'll find a woman who's living not afraid, not waiting, just breathing. The sea breeze slipped through the window and lifted a note on the table. Peace is an asset, don't sign it over to anyone. I smiled. Peace, yes, now it looks like me. 2 years passed. I stopped counting by calendars and started counting by the smell of wind and the brightness of morning. The waves out there keep time like a clock, the only thing in my life that has never missed an appointment. The second year, after the trial, is also the second year. I haven't gotten a single call from Lauren or Tyler. No birthday texts, no Christmas greetings, no Mother's Day card. But the strange thing is, I don't fall apart anymore. No more waiting, no more flinching every time the phone rings. I just smile, turn on the oven, and get ready for my own small party, the birthday I throw for my chosen family. That afternoon, the sea-facing house smelled of cinnamon apple pie. Ruth came early with a pot of mint tea. Denise brought a bundle of dried lavender, and Maya arrived a little late, slightly out of breath. Sorry, court ran long this morning, but I brought wine. We put on jazz, opened the porch doors, and let the wind blow through the house. Dean stopped by too, still in uniform, carrying a small cake with a handwritten line, "For the bravest lady in town." I laughed. my voice catching a little. If you knew how soft I was 2 years ago, you wouldn't call me that. Dean smiled. Brave doesn't mean never weak, it means weak and still moving. We ate, told stories, and laughed, the sound I once thought I'd never have again. No fancy cake, no noisy toasts, just the smell of baking, the sunset light, and 4 friends around a wooden table. I looked around and suddenly realized, this is the real family, the ones not tied by blood but who never leave. That evening, after everyone left, I cleaned the table. Under a dessert plate, I found a small envelope labeled, "From Emma to Grandma." I froze. The postmark was from an elementary school in another city. I opened it and found a small note, written in neater handwriting than before. "Grandma, Mom didn't let me send a gift this year, so I'm writing in secret. When I'm old enough to decide, I'll come visit you. I still remember the way you told me about starfish, and I drew it on the back. I love you so, so much. Emma." I flipped it over and saw a small drawing, 2 people, one big and one small, lying on the sand, looking up at a sky full of stars. In the corner, she'd added, "I believe stars still shine even when you can't see them in the daytime." I pressed the letter to my chest. Tears fell, but they were warm not for what was lost, but for knowing something beautiful still exists somewhere, even if not within reach. The next morning, I wrote back to Emma. "My dear Emma, when you look up, you'll see the stars like little beads of memory. I look at that same sky every night. If you come someday, we'll map the stars so we won't lose each other, no matter where we are. Remember, you can love someone without losing yourself. Love, Grandma." I tucked the letter into a small notebook and marked it with a sprig of dried lavender. When she finds her way to me, I'll give it to her, not as an explanation, but as a map to freedom. A few weeks later, Ruth shared big news. "Josephine, I'm moving out on my own." I looked at her and still saw a little worry in her eyes. "I rented a small place at the end of Ocean View. Not far. But I want to cook the first meal in my own kitchen." I was happy for her. And I knew the feeling, equal parts excitement and tremble, like learning to walk after an accident. I helped her make a safety list. Emergency numbers, the door camera spot, the porch light schedule, and regular health checkups. Ruth smiled, half teasing, half touched. "You know, I once thought I couldn't start over, but watching you, I believe I can." I answered softly. "I thought that too. Until the waves taught me everything can change direction." On moving day, I walked her to the door. That night, like always, I sat on my porch and watched the light from her new place flicker in the distance. A small light, but steady proof that some people arrive late in life, but right on time in your heart. A week later, Denise called with news. "House sold, Joe. The buyer's a widow from Maine, also in her 60s. I told her this neighborhood has good neighbors." I smiled. "Thank you, kind agent." When the woman moved in, we brought a small lavender plant and set it on her porch. She hugged me and whispered, "I used to fear starting alone. But seeing you smile, peace doesn't feel scary anymore." Walking back, Denise said, "Funny how some houses don't just change owners, they change the air." I nodded. Maybe when someone learns to live true, the place they live warms up too. Time passed, and I agreed to teach a small class at the community center. Property rights and personal boundaries for older adults. Maya suggested it. Just tell your story, no heavy law. They need to hear from someone who lived it. At first I refused, afraid my voice would shake. But that first day, facing a dozen silver heads and curious eyes, I took a deep breath and began. "I'm not a lawyer, just someone who nearly lost everything because of the word trust. Trust isn't wrong, what's wrong is trusting without limits. Boundaries don't make us selfish, they make love clean." After class, an elderly man came up and said softly, "Ma'am, I'm going home to talk to my son, not to fight, just to talk." "Thank you." I smiled. If one story helps one person keep their home, then everything I went through was worth it. That night, I opened an old album. Back then, our family photos always missed someone: the photographer, the angry one, the one avoiding the frame. Now, in the living room, I hung a new picture. Me on the wooden porch, a blazing red sunset behind me, holding a cup of salt coffee. No one cropped out, and no one needed to stand beside me to make happiness. That photo, to me, proves a life can mend. I stood before it and whispered, "Peace is a decision, not a circumstance." Outside, the waves rose and fell like the earth's heartbeat. I realized the last big wave of my life isn't loss, it's the return of myself. I inhaled and smiled. If someone asked me what happiness looks like, I'd say, it looks like tonight's sunset, no debts owed, only fullness in your chest. One early morning, before sunlight reached the porch, I opened my laptop, set a cup of tea beside it, and wrote the final opening line for my blog. Love isn't measured by waiting, it's measured by the way we live. I read it 3 times. Simple, but it holds everything I learned in 2 years about loss, about boundaries, about loving without losing yourself. I no longer write the blog to tell stories, but to put a clean period at the end of a journey. At the bottom, I introduced something new. A scholarship in my mother's name, Eleanor's Light, for older women starting over, even if it's just a cooking class, driving lessons, or learning to Audipon Eleanor's Light. Use a smartphone. I don't have much money, but enough to start. In the description, I wrote, "My mother's light never glittered, but it was bright enough to guide me out of the fog. Now I just want to pass that light on." When the scholarship paperwork was done, Maya called. Her voice moved. "You know, you didn't just win a case, you changed how people see aging." I laughed. "No, Maya, I just learned to live, not wait." On my front door, I taped a small note in blue ink. Not for sale, not for rent, not negotiating, only coffee. Half joke, half true. Plenty of people have tried to buy my beach house, offering twice the price. Some even pitched turning it into a homestay. I only smiled. This house isn't for business. It's the rest of my heart, and I won't slice it up. Every morning, I brew a pot of coffee, open the porch, and let the aroma ride the sea breeze. People say coffee smells like memory, but to me, it's the scent of freedom chosen. That afternoon, I sat on the porch and listened to the waves. The sound hadn't changed, but I had. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and said softly, "Thank you to the version of me who turned her back on silence." I used to fear the silence between calls that never came. Now I know silence isn't scary, it's only scary when you don't use it to hear yourself. I opened my notebook and wrote on a new page, "If they call someday, I'll open my heart, but with clear boundaries. I can forgive, but I won't trade peace for kinship again." Boundaries, in the end, aren't walls, they're maps that keep us from losing ourselves. That autumn, I turned 69. No flowers, no gifts, just wind and laughter. Dean brought a small plant and said, "It's called Wind's Whisper. It blooms only when the soil is watered steadily and the grower isn't in a hurry." I smiled. Sounds like me, doesn't it? Nearly 70 years to bloom one season of peace. We sat, together without many words. Ruth came with apple tart, and Denise swung by late with fresh-cut lavender. We didn't call it a party, just an ordinary afternoon where everyone could be themselves. That night, I went to the beach. The water reflected the moon, rippling like a silver ribbon. I lit a small candle, set a cup of tea on the porch, and invited the wind in my little ritual of making peace with life. No music, no incense, just wind and salt. I closed my eyes and saw myself clearly, not the mother cut out of the frame, but the person standing in the center of her own picture. Quietly, like a thank you, I said, "Thank you. because I'm still here. And I live. If my story reaches you, maybe it's because you carry a piece of me too, the one who loved hard, endured in silence, and finally learned to stand on her own side. I want to ask, where are you listening from? A small house by a lake? An apartment in the city? Or somewhere you're learning to begin again? Leave a comment and tell me about a time you chose yourself, even if it was just saying no to what was hurting you. If this story helps you, please like and subscribe so more older people can find a way out the way we did. Thank you for your time. I don't know who you are, but I know we just shared the same breath. The breath of people who chose peace over fear. I truly appreciate you. Night fell, and the wind poured into the house with the smell of salt and a strange warmth. I stood, gently closed the blog, and turned off the living room light. By the window, the wind's whisper trembled. The moon still shone, the waves still sang, and I, the woman once labeled incapacitated, now have only one thing left to lose: fear. I sat down, took the last sip of tea, and spoke aloud my farewell to the past. I live. I don't wait.